A young boy recalls a terrible nightmare. On the day of his 5th birthday, he collapsed. The dream was of a grim future. A man with white hair, bloodied and defeated, kneels before a dark-haired swordsman as a group of young women look on. The swordsman's expression is cold and resolute as he prepares to deliver the final blow. The condemned man, his face a mask of blood and despair, can only await his fate. As the blade descends with a sickening finality, a realization floods the boy's mind, even in his sleep. He remembers everything. This scene is from a game he knew intimately, and the villain being executed is him. The boy jolts awake in his bed, clutching his chest, his face pale with sweat and terror at the horrifying truth. He remembers the game he loved so much, a fantasy world of love and war designed for adults. Its protagonist was a man destined to become the strongest swordsman, the Sword Emperor, who was at that time enjoying his life at a prestigious academy. The hero's journey was one of growth, where he would find love and train alongside his companions to become ever stronger. This path would ultimately lead him to confront and defeat the family of an evil duke, who was secretly plotting a coup d'etat to seize power. And to his horror, he now understands his place in this story. He is Luke Hagado Descustos, the 5-year-old second son of that very duke. He also recalls that in the game, Luke was burdened with a terrible nickname. He was called the Gross Fat Toad. This name was used to mock his awful appearance and personality, as he acted like a petty tyrant, antagonizing the protagonist and his allies while hiding behind his family's authority. The boy shudders, remembering the game had hardcore elements he found difficult to stomach. The game provided a tragic backstory for Luke's villainy. His mother died, giving birth to him, causing his family to neglect him entirely. He developed an inferiority complex, never honing his innate magical talent. In a desperate bid for recognition, he committed evil deeds, only to be used as a sacrificial pawn by the Duke. His one and only purpose in the narrative was to be killed. He recoiled at the thought of his future self, a grotesque figure he was destined to become in just 10 years. He remembered that both he and the game's protagonist were meant to be 15 when the story began, a fact that filled his young body with a profound sense of dread. A flicker of determination ignited within him. If he could stop himself from becoming that monster and avoid his villainous path, he might be able to change his fate. He didn't want to die. With the memories of his previous life, he reasoned he didn't need the affection of his family anyway. He briefly entertained the fantasy of living out his days in peaceful happiness. As a noble, he wouldn't even have to worry about earning a living. But the pleasant thought was immediately and forcefully crushed. No, that wasn't possible. The grim reality settled in. He couldn't change the fundamental nature of his family. They were evil. Therefore, he would never be able to escape the purge destined for them. His only path forward was to acquire enough power to defend himself when that day came. An idea sparked. He stared down at his small hands, recalling a crucial detail from the game's lore. The character of Luke Descustos was supposed to possess a talent for magic. Concentrating, he could feel a faint, soul-like energy gathering around him, mana. But a practical problem immediately presented itself. In the game, there was a user interface with clear commands. How was he supposed to use magic in this world without one? He decided to try the simplest method he could think of, treating the command like a chant. Closing his eyes and clasping his hands, he focused his intent and spoke the word aloud. Heal. A soft light began to emanate from his body. The light faded. He opened his eyes, wondering if the spell had actually worked. Without a health bar to confirm the results, it was impossible to be certain, but he did feel a little better. A surge of hope propelled him forward. Perhaps he could improve. He spent the rest of the night practicing, his voice a quiet, persistent echo in the dark room as he chanted the healing spell again and again. His practice continued until the first light of dawn broke through the window. As he lay exhausted in bed, the door to his room creaked open. A voice called out, addressing him as Luke Sama, asking him how he was feeling and announcing that it was time to get up. He groggily awakens, feeling sluggish but no longer ill. He wonders if he lost consciousness from running out of mana, concluding that his reserves must be small, perhaps only enough for 10 healing spells. As he contemplates his limitations, a figure enters his room, observing that he still seems unwell. He realizes he will never understand magic without proper study and desperately wishes for someone to teach him. The visitor is Syrup, a 12-year-old dog-beast man and his exclusive maid. Convinced his father would never approve a tutor, Luke decides he must study on his own and asks Syrup to read a book for him. She offers a simple picture book, but he points to a dense tome titled Magic Fundamentals, declaring his intent to learn magic. His earnest plea strikes her like an arrow. He presses his hands together, looking up at her with a pleading expression, asking her again. Seeing his vulnerability, she thinks to herself that he really is just a boy after all. He tells her she is the only one he can rely on and asks if she would also teach him how to read and do math. Overcome with joy and a sense of purpose, she beams and clenches a fist, enthusiastically declaring that he can count on her. Full of vigor, she suggests they take the opportunity to start physical training as well, citing a common trait of dog-beast men. From his bed, he bluntly declines. Later, as Syrup reads from the difficult book, Luke expresses his amazement that she can handle such long words. She struggles to articulate the concepts, stammering through an explanation of the difference between attributeless and attribute magic, confirming for Luke just how complex the subject is. The text explains the nature of mana, a transparent energy that floats in the air, its usable amount and power determined by one's innate talent. A realization dawns on him. The soul-like presence he felt was mana itself. This confirms his suspicion. He truly does have a talent for magic. He continues to learn that casting a spell is a matter of simple imagination, visualizing the effect and letting one's mana flow accordingly. He finally understands how he cast the healing spell. He had instinctively imagined his own mana mending his wounds. He continued his studies, learning about the fundamental division in magic. There was attributeless magic, a basic form anyone could use, and attribute magic, which required a special talent and was the domain of most nobles. As he drifted off to sleep, he considered his own lineage. The Disgustos family was known for its excellence in the magical arts, and he hoped that he, too, might be able to use attribute magic before long. Having studied until exhaustion, he was found by Syrup, who gently carried his sleeping form over to his bed. She carefully tucked him beneath the covers, ensuring he was warm. For a moment, she watched over him, her expression thoughtful as he slept. A year passed. In that time, he had made significant progress. He discovered that by using up his entire mana supply each day, his total capacity would increase. He recalled how difficult it was at first, fainting constantly from the exertion. To avoid the fate of the gross, fat toad he remembered from the game, he also learned to read and began studying on his own. However, he lamented that he still hadn't found a magic tutor, as his life in the annex with only a few servants limited his learning opportunities. He vividly remembered the depiction of Luke from the game, a figure plagued by acne, blemishes, warts, cracked skin, and obesity. It was clear there was much to improve physically. He resolved that his first priority must be to take care of his health. His first step was hygiene. He was amazed to realize that people in this world didn't seem to bathe or wash their faces daily. Creating a lather of bubbles in his hand, he decided to use this to wash his face. As he did so, Syrup approached, asking why the water was so foamy. Wiping his face, he explained that he had delicate skin and needed to wash it gently. His maid watched him, her expression one of intrigued curiosity. She reacts with shock, questioning how he could possibly have delicate skin. Luke calmly dismisses her concern for the present, cryptically alluding to a future appearance she couldn't possibly foresee. And so, they began a new skincare routine, washing their faces twice a day. Syrup, ever the dedicated maid, announced her intention to learn his methods completely as part of her duties. His new regimen soon expanded to include regular bathing, a time he also used for magic practice. He dreamed of a future where he could afford the finest soaps, lotions, and sunscreens without a second thought. As he soaked, Syrup watched from the veranda, admitting she still found this level of washing unusual, though she was glad he was teaching her. He reassured her, promising that with continued care, her skin would become completely smooth and she would grow into a great beauty. His appearance had indeed changed. Syrup noted how much healthier he looked, a stark contrast to his past self. He remembered the constant discomfort after meals, forcing him to use healing magic on himself in bed. This prompted a major change. He had informed the staff that he and Syrup would be taking over their own cooking from now on. The results were immediate. Enjoying a meal he had prepared himself, he realized his digestive system wasn't the problem. It was the local cuisine. Once he began cooking dishes from his past life, his health improved dramatically. His self-improvement extended to his daily schedule. Syrup observed that he no longer slept in, having established a routine of waking early to walk in the forest near the annex and get daily sun. He even began incorporating light exercise and walks into his day, a development that delighted Syrup, who cheered that he could finally go outside. Seeing his progress, she suggested they start proper training, but he immediately shut down the idea with a firm no thanks. He confessed that he truly dislikes exercising, making intense training completely out of the question, much to her surprise. He turned to her and explained his true desire, to live a healthy and easygoing life. The simple, unambitious goal left Syrup momentarily confused, but he confirmed it with a quiet, resolute yes. He affirms Syrup's concern, acknowledging that an easygoing life will be difficult to achieve. He explains that if he were to simply eat and sleep, he would quickly become something terrible, a prospect Syrup finds confusing. She studies him, finding it hard to reconcile his current cute appearance with the future she knows. In her mind, she pictures the grotesque, toad-like man he was destined to become, a version of him that lamented his lost potential for handsomeness. He continues his explanation from the bath, adding that such a lifestyle would also grant him an abundance of free time. Syrup questions if this is because of his noble status. She points out that constant leisure ceases to be enjoyable, suggesting that even endless trips to amusement parks or casinos would eventually lose their appeal. He internally agrees. While he was born a noble, he feels there is no safety net for him. Based on his father's cold demeanor, he is certain he will eventually be sacrificed or abandoned. He remembers the original Luke's path, a man who squandered his privilege and brought about his own ruin. Determined not to repeat this, he resolves to use his advantages to prepare for what lies ahead. His primary goal is to leverage his privileged childhood to avoid future hardships. His ideal plan involves finding a wife to support him. As a backup, should marriage not be an option, he knows he must secure a steady source of income to live comfortably on his own. A crucial decision comes to mind: attending the academy. He recalls that in the original story, The character of Luke was central to the Academy arc. The narrative of that world, he knows, is split into two major parts, with the Alessida's Royal Academy as a pivotal set. He mentally reviews the two paths: the war arc, which involves resolving a major conflict started by a villain, and the Academy arc, which centers on relationships and character development. He understands that successfully navigating both is the key to securing his future. The thought causes him visible distress. He realizes that avoiding the Academy would dramatically increase his chances of survival. And yet, despite the risk, he knows there is a compelling reason he must go. He thought of the game's characters, a fond blush rising to his cheeks. He loved them. With this renewed purpose, he looked out over the sprawling city and made a vow. He would enjoy this world as Luke, aiming to live as a happy slacker. His desire for an easy life became a topic of conversation with Syrup. She insisted that to live an easygoing and healthy life, he must learn swordsmanship, not just for fun, but for self-protection. He gently pushed back, admitting he'd rather move as little as possible, which made her pout. He noted her fondness for the sword. He then questioned the necessity of learning it himself when he had her to protect him. Surprised, she asked how he knew she was training in swordsmanship. He simply replied that it was just a feeling. With a smile, he declared that he would leave all the sword fighting to her, an arrangement she happily accepted. As she left his room for the night, she wished him well. The following morning, he reflected on his refusal to exercise. He understood that to stay healthy, some movement was unavoidable. It was for this very reason that he had invented a new spell. He presented his creation, a small, gelatinous being with a simple face. This was his original attributeless magic, a spell he named Val. The spell's greatest advantage was its ability to function even while he slept. To comprehend how Val worked, one first needed to understand the fundamentals of attributeless magic. This basic form of magic simply transforms mana into different shapes and is broadly divided into 5 major categories. He elaborated on 2 of these categories, which nearly everyone could use. The first was daily life magic, for simple tasks like illumination or cleaning. He surmised the latter was popular due to infrequent bathing in this world. The second was strength magic, which uses mana to temporarily boost physical attributes like strength or defense, though it sacrifices endurance, and its effectiveness depends on the user's physical condition. He continued his explanation, describing the fourth school, enchantment magic. This special form of magic enhances a weapon with attributes, but it is a specialized skill that only smiths and enchanters can use. He admitted he had no idea how to use it himself. He then detailed the final 2 major schools. Support magic, he explained, consists of buffing and debuffing others by covering them in mana, with the effect's power depending on the user's imagination. The last was restoration magic, which uses mana to precisely stimulate the body and promote recovery. He noted that thanks to the education from his previous life, he was quite skilled in this area. He concluded that all schools of attributeless magic rely on the same core principle, transforming mana. It was this very principle that he used to create Val, his own self-sufficient type of spell. To demonstrate its ease of use, he stood outside and gave a simple command to the gelatinous orb of mana floating beside him. Val, fetch me that water. The orb immediately drifted toward a nearby table. The mana construct obediently enveloped the glass and brought it to him. Taking the drink, he gave his thanks and then rested his head on the table, announcing that the real test was about to begin as he left everything to Val. As he slept, the spell carried out its primary directive. The gelatinous form of Val slowly enveloped his resting body. The spell then began to exercise his body for him. It forced his limbs through a series of strenuous stretches and movements, contorting his form while he remained completely unconscious. He considered it the perfect solution. If he could exercise while unconscious, then training would be a piece of cake. A satisfied smile spread across his face as he stood beside his creation. He marveled at the fact that Val could move on its own. With this, he could now train his body while maintaining his easygoing, lazy lifestyle. Lying on a couch, however, he was forced to acknowledge the one downside to his plan. Even though he slept through the workout, he still got muscle aches the next day. He lay on the couch, surrounded by towering stacks of books. His plan was proceeding smoothly, yet he knew there was still a great deal of work ahead. His stomach rumbled loudly, a sudden and pressing hunger taking hold. He mused that despite it being only afternoon, the effects of his exercise, combined with his growing body, were already demanding more fuel. Just then, Syrup arrived, presenting him with a delectable dessert. Deciding that excessive moderation had its own drawbacks, he took a spoonful. This, he thought with satisfaction, was the very goal he was striving for: the simple, indulgent life of a lazy, villainous noble. 5 years have passed. In a well-appointed library, Luke, now 11 years old, sits engrossed in a book while resting on a large, comfortable cushion. Standing attentively nearby is Syrup, who is now 17. He continues to read, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. Syrup, however, watches him with a sly grin, softly calling his name. He finally looks up from his book and asks what she wants. As he considers her, he has a private thought, realizing there's no difference between magically carrying a glass and carrying himself. He decides it would be a pain to explain this to Syrup, given her poor aptitude for magic. His train of thought is broken by Syrup's shocked cry, as she points out that he and his cushion are now levitating high above the floor. He casually dodges her question about how he's floating and instead invites her to join him for a ride. Her shock instantly transforms into wide-eyed excitement as she eagerly asks if she can. He confirms that she can, of course. She steps onto the levitating cushion, trembling with apprehension. He reassures her that there's no need to be scared, explaining that he is using his mana to properly support it. With a nervous gulp, she accepts his explanation. Her fear quickly melts away, replaced by an expression of utter surprise and comfort as she settles onto the cushion beside it. She exclaims that she has never felt anything so comfortable before. Luke replies that he's glad to hear it. Having now experienced his magic firsthand, Syrup raises her hand and asks if she can pose another question. She asks how his body is so well-trained, pointing out that she has only ever seen him reading, sleeping, or taking walks. He acknowledges that her confusion is understandable. After changing his clothes, he agrees to tell her, thanking her for asking. Leading her to a more open space, he begins his explanation. He states that he first bunches his mana and solidifies it, demonstrating by forming a glowing, swirling orb in his palm. He tells her to watch closely, then announces he is about to begin. A powerful aura erupts from his body. He internally reflects that over the past 5 years, his Val has evolved a great deal, and along with it, his comprehension of its power. He moved with a sudden, startling grace, executing a series of fluid martial arts forms in the open courtyard as Syrup watched from the doorway. His movements were a blur of controlled violence. A sharp block, a high kick, a powerful punch. Syrup could only watch, her eyes wide with amazement, exclaiming her wonder at his display of martial arts. Her amazement quickly turned to confusion. She called out, asking what was happening and reminding him that he always claimed to hate intense exercise. She stammered his name, still trying to process the scene, as he completed his routine and settled into a firm, focused stance. He let out a quiet breath, a light flush on his cheeks from the effort. Syrup rushed to his side, her hands clasped in excitement, declaring that his performance was amazing. He turned to her and asked for her opinion. She explained her surprise, admitting she hadn't realized how hard he'd been working. With great enthusiasm, she told him his movements were those of a master, unlike anything she had ever witnessed, even from seasoned martial artists. He simply asked if that was so, taking in her praise. He then began to explain the source of his skill. It was a new spell he had invented called Trace. He revealed that he absorbs Val into his body, allowing him to pass memories directly from his brain to it. This spell, he continued, allows him to recreate the movements of his favorite martial arts masters. He clarified that even if he himself has forgotten the precise details, Val can access those memories and mimic them perfectly. Depending on the source, Val could even combine moves from his favorite fighting games and manga. And so, he concluded with a dramatic flourish. All the knowledge he possessed of countless fighting styles and their histories had merged, culminating in his own unique, personal fighting style. He explains that he isn't even consciously aware of his own movements, so he can't claim to be working hard. Still, this method allows him to train his body, gain muscle memory, and grow stronger, which he finds quite convenient. While his floating spell is impressive enough, he has now invented another new spell entirely. In response to this revelation, Syrup stares at him, her eyes wide with astonishment, and declares him a genius. He quietly refutes the claim. She seems to understand his modesty, musing that it must be difficult for him to comprehend his own talent. Internally, she marvels that her master, at only 11 years old, has already peered into the profound abyss of magic. Luke, however, is completely lost, admitting he doesn't understand what she means. He turns away, feeling the fatigue from his workout, and asks if she needs to prepare a change of clothes for him. He adds that this all feels natural to him because he retains the knowledge from his previous life, even if he still doesn't fully understand how it all works. They arrive at a spring in the forest. Luke announces his intention to take a quick bath, and Syrup immediately states that she will join him. As he settles into the water, he reflects that this spring is their most convenient bathing spot. Meanwhile, Syrup stands by the water's edge, her thoughts drifting to the recent compliments from the other maids about her growing beauty. He observes her, recalling the beauty regimen he taught her 5 years ago, which she has diligently followed. Her swordsmanship has also honed her fierce spirit, and he feels her beauty has recently ascended to a new level. He calls out her name, and she responds instantly. As he pets her head, he considers it a special privilege to see this softer side of her, like a loyal dog overjoyed by the simplest acknowledgement. Back inside and dressed, he assigns Syrup a task. He instructs her to inform his father that he wishes to have his magical attribute officially determined. She accepts the order without hesitation. He settles back onto a large cushion, expressing his anticipation for the event as Syrup departs to carry out his request. He holds up his hand, contemplating the nature of magic in this world. Here, the innate magical affinity one is born with, known as attribute magic, is considered a power bestowed directly by God. He wonders who will be the one to determine his attribute. He imagines a simple declaration. If someone tells him his attribute is fire, he can then use it. The answer to his question is the Ministry of Magic of Alecidus. This institution manages all attribute spells in the kingdom, a gathering place for the world's greatest sorcerers. As a noble, it is his privilege to have someone from that elite group come to inform him of his attribute. He acknowledges that some people are born without one, but he feels no need to worry about such a possibility. His confidence stems from his lineage. The Disgustos family is renowned, even among the nobility, for their exceptionally powerful attributes. His father possesses sand, his older brother, iron, his stepmother, rock, and his older sister the unique attribute of seduction. Contemplating his family's legacy, he wonders what his own attribute will be, a smile of eager anticipation on his face. He simply cannot wait. The very next day, his door swings open without warning. A voice exclaims in surprise at the sight of the large cushion he is riding. The visitor, a man with glasses and a dark coat, remarks on the beautiful girl he sees. Luke, momentarily confused, wonders who this man is and why he's being mistaken for a girl, internally reflecting on his beauty regimen. Syrup steps forward to make the introduction. The visitor is Malsa Glicko, the chief of the Ministry of Magic's Attribute Bureau. The chief falls silent, observing the child on the cushion and adjusting his glasses. After a moment of observation, he finally speaks, addressing the child before him as young lady. He praises the servant's splendid memory, impressed that she recalled his entire title after hearing it just once. He inwardly reflects that such diligence is to be expected from a servant of the esteemed Disgustos family, who must not slip up. Having offered his praise, he then inquires about the whereabouts of the young master of the Disgustos family. Syrup's response that it is only natural seems to confuse him as he glances past her into the room, his thoughts trailing off. From his seat on the couch, Luke wonders to himself if the official truly just praised the maid. Syrup, noticing the man's confusion, apologizes for her own rudeness and formally introduces the boy as Luke Hugolo Disgustos. The introduction gives Malsa a moment to reflect. He had anticipated that Syrup, a beast man, would be berated given the state church's doctrine of civil man supremacy. This teaching dictates that all non-human races, demi-humans, beastmen, spirits, and demons, are to be scorned. Luke rises from his seat and approaches the official, casually addressing him as Malsan. The man corrects him, restating his full name, Malsa Glicko, as Luke confidently declares that he is sure the official is not a bad person. He then extends a hand, offering a simple introduction. Just call me Luke. It's nice to meet you. The official looks at the young boy, his expression softening with a hint of surprise at the direct and friendly gesture. He accepts the handshake, replying in kind. With the introductions concluded, Malsa announces that the time has come to check Luke's magic attribute. He instructs the boy to close his eyes. From a distance, Syrup watches, sensing the boy's quiet exhale and wondering if he is nervous. He holds up a slender, shimmering instrument, its tip beginning to glow, and declares that he is beginning the procedure. He completes the test, and the results manifest within Luke's consciousness. Two words echo in his mind: sleep and sloth. The moment he heard Malsa utter those words aloud, a profound change occurred within him. He felt the attributes settle within him, though it was less a new arrival and more a sudden, deep understanding of something he had always possessed. The realization was, in a word, amazing. He explained to Malsa that simply hearing the names of his attributes gave him an intuitive grasp of the magic he could wield. Malsa, seeing his understanding, offered to elaborate. He began by stating that certain unique attributes are classified as rare magic, and confirmed that both sleep and sloth belong to this exceptional category. He continued, explaining that while most attributes are publicly documented, rare magic is customarily kept secret. He proposed recording Luke's abilities vaguely, as magic that influences the human body, a suggestion to which the boy readily agreed. The boy then voiced a concern, noting that only simple applications of his new powers came to mind, and questioned if other methods existed. Malsa clarified that all mages have spells they are naturally suited for, but true improvement comes from researching one's own attributes. He emphasized this point with a raised finger, declaring that finding magic personally suited to oneself is the one true path to mastery. Luke quietly contemplated this advice. He then affirmed that he would remember the guidance as he began his training. The statement seemed to catch Malsa off guard, leaving him momentarily surprised. His surprise turned to shock when Luke casually mentioned that he hadn't known appraisal magic existed. Stunned, Malsa demanded to know how the boy could possibly be aware of such a thing. Luke calmly explains his reasoning. He reveals that, as a reincarnator, he simply figured things out, though he understood it was meant to be a secret. He then questions Malsa, asking if his knowledge wasn't already evident from the fact that Malsa had just appraised his attributes. His directness leaves Malsa flustered and stammering. To deflect, he quickly calls out to Syrup, instructing her to bring some tea for their guest. The Beastman, maid, promptly agrees. Moments later, with the tea served, Malsa takes a thoughtful sip. He closes his eyes, savoring the flavor, and declares it delicious. He inquires about the tea's name. Luke explains that it's a special herbal blend he grew himself, unavailable for purchase anywhere, and personally recommends it. Malsa notes that it has a clarifying effect on his mind. Malsa smiles, thanking the boy for his understanding. Luke offers to give him some of the tea leaves and confirms that he will keep the matter of appraisal magic a secret. The conversation takes a more personal turn as Malsa mentions he is sure his own daughter would enjoy the tea. Luke expresses his surprise, learning for the first time that Malsa has a daughter. Malsa adds that she's about Luke's age and has a great fondness for magic. The mention of magic reignites Malsa's professional curiosity. He leans forward eagerly, asking about the flying cushion Luke had used earlier, exclaiming that it couldn't possibly be an ordinary spell. In response to the outburst, Luke simply smiles and reassures him that it's fine. Malsa, catching himself, quickly apologizes for his sudden excitement. With the atmosphere settled once more, Luke gestures toward the floating cushion, inviting Malsa to have a proper discussion about it. After their talk concludes, Malsa stands to leave, thanking Luke for his valuable time. As he turns, Luke calls out to him familiarly as Mal-san and, with a serious expression, asks if Malsa would consider becoming his tutor. His unexpected request catches Malsa completely off guard. Covering his mouth in surprise, Malsa states that he personally doesn't think Luke needs a tutor and questions what, exactly, the boy hopes to learn from him. He clarifies that his request is simple. He would just like Malsa to answer any letters he sends with questions about magic he doesn't understand. He is essentially proposing they become pen pals. Malsa considers the proposition, a slight, thoughtful smile appearing on his face as he murmurs that he finds the idea interesting. Luke's expression brightens with hope as he asks if that means Malsa accepts. In turn, Malsa asks if he would also be permitted to ask Luke some questions from time to time. Malsa readily agrees that he wouldn't mind at all, though he adds the humble caveat that he might not be able to answer every question. Hearing this, Luke beams and declares that they have a deal. The two smile warmly at one another, the arrangement settled. Luke offers his thanks, and Malsa replies that he would be happy to write with him. And so, their correspondence began. With a tutor secured, Luke's knowledge of magic grew considerably through his exchanges with Malsa. He sits comfortably, reading one of the letters, a look of understanding dawning on his face. Through these lessons, he came to understand a fundamental concept. Unlike attributeless magic, where mana can be freely shaped by imagination, attributed spells must follow specific rules. He realized that his appraisal magic was the key to understanding his own inherent magic. This inherent magic is the term for the basic spells of a given attribute. Using fire as an example, its beginner spells are Pilot Light to create a flame, Fireball to solidify mana, and Fire Arrow to launch it. Further mastery depends on the user's own knowledge and practice. Applying this principle, he considers his own abilities. His Sleep attribute also has 3 inherent spells. The first is simply Sleep, which can put a target to sleep. The spell's effect can be fine-tuned, as its potency varies based on the amount of mana used and the target's resistance. He continued to read, learning about the other 2 inherent spells of the Sleep attribute. The second, Sleep Timer, allowed the caster to define a specific period of sleep through touch, a duration during which the target would not wake up no matter what happened. The third spell, Sleep Delete, was a countermeasure, enabling the user to forcefully dispel any sleep magic. The implications of these abilities began to sink in. He realized that if he used his Sloth attribute as well, his targets would have no idea what was happening. While it was true that magic could be defended against with resistance and defensive spells, he could put people to sleep before they even understood the situation, bypassing their defenses entirely. His mind raced with possibilities. He mused that if a Fire Arrow spell existed, he wished there was a Sleep Arrow too, allowing him to affect targets from a distance. A confident smile spread across his face as he realized that both of his attributes were so powerful, they felt like cheats. He even entertained the mischievous thought of putting a teacher to sleep to skip class whenever he wanted. Looking over the letters and books on his desk, he felt a surge of excitement. There was no end to the different spells he wanted to experiment with. No amount of time would be enough to test them all. Luke Disgustos has fallen into a new habit. Every morning, he cedes control of his body to Val for physical practice. He finds that this routine clears his mind, allowing him to better focus on his magical experiments later. As he finishes, Syrup the Beastman approaches, asking if her master would like a meal. Luke enthusiastically agrees, requesting that she make one for him. He reflects on their arrangement. Although Syrup is perfect at any and all maid work, he still takes turns cooking, preparing dishes from the memories of his past life. Her meals, while perfectly edible, possess a glaring flaw. They completely lack any attention to detail, often resulting in a mushy, unappealing presentation. Deciding to let her cook this time, he resolves to wash the sweat from his training while he waits. He feels his worries growing with the years, but at 11 years old, he pushes the thoughts aside for later. He heads to the closest water source, a small, secluded pool. As he prepares to wash, he stops, hearing faint voices nearby. The voice belongs to a young girl, huddled and terrified. She fears she is about to die all alone. From the edge of the clearing, Luke sees her, realizing the supposedly empty place is occupied. He assesses the situation. The area isn't particularly dangerous. She must just be a lost child. He calls out to her, asking who she is. Startled by his voice, the girl lets out a cry of surprise. Luke pushes through the foliage, confirming that there are indeed people here. She looks up and sees him, shirtless, with a towel slung over his shoulder. The girl's face flushes red, and she covers her mouth, completely flustered by the unexpected encounter. She stammers, completely flustered and covering her face with her hands. Nearby, the shirtless Luke realizes she must be a guest for one of his sister's tea parties. An event he had completely forgotten was happening today. He tries to put her at ease, introducing himself as Luke Hugelo Disgustos. The girl's eyes widen in recognition. She realizes he must be the younger brother of her acquaintance, Iris. In a sudden, formal display, She bows deeply and announces herself as Karen C. Caribbean, the daughter of Count Caribbean. Luke is amused by her earnestness, finding her quite funny. He kneels down to her level, his expression softening as he asks if she can use attribute magic. Karen looks up, her initial apprehension replaced by wide-eyed surprise. He then asks if she would show him her magic, explaining that he has a fondness for it. Flustered but eager, Karen readily agrees. She enthusiastically declares she will do so right away. Luke, observing her attire, asks if she works for a store or something similar. Ignoring his question, she excuses herself and pulls a small, ornate pouch from a hidden pocket in her dress. With a soft pop, she summons a full set of cooking utensils and ingredients from the bag, marveling at her own magic and noting that such pouches can be bought anywhere. He watches, intrigued, realizing her attribute magic is a storage pouch capable of holding a vast number of items. Still shirtless, he remarks that he's curious to see her magic, but asks if she could please put on some clothes first. Instead of demonstrating the pouch further, she immediately begins to cook with the summoned ingredients, the sound of sizzling filling the quiet clearing. A short while later, she presents him with a steaming bowl of spiced moon rabbit soup, explaining that she made it with what she had on hand and inviting him to enjoy it. He brought the spoon to his lips, wondering what made food cooked with attribute magic so different. The aroma alone was delicious. The first bite sent a shock through him. He exclaimed that it was unbelievably delicious, better than anything he had ever tasted, even in his past life. As Karen beamed with pleasure, he was left momentarily stunned and confused by the overwhelming flavor. He felt a surge of power welling up inside him and realized the dish had given him a beneficial status condition, a buff. Looking down, he saw the bowl was already empty. The realization struck him. Karen was a young, noble lady capable of cooking dishes that enhanced one's abilities. His eyes fixed on Karen with a new intensity. He would not let her get away. She was the greatest possible asset to support the slothful life he dreamed of. He called out her name to get her attention. He leaned forward and asked if she would cook this soup for him every day once they grew up. Karen, taken aback by the sudden and serious question, could only stare in confusion. He then declared with a bright, earnest expression that she should marry him, adding that he would happily marry into her family to make it happen. She flushed, her face turning bright red at the proposal. Luke's reasoning was simple. He needed her incredibly tasty cooking, and more importantly, he believed she would support him even when the Disgusto's family eventually met its downfall. That day marked a miraculous encounter. Karen's mind reeled with a single, overwhelming thought. He had just proposed to her. Sometime later, Luke reflects on how he immediately contacted his father to make the proposal official. His father, showing his usual lack of interest, simply told him to do as he liked. Events proceeded swiftly, and a meeting was arranged between the families. As Luke, Karen, and Syrup arrive at a restaurant, a large, jovial man greets them warmly. He introduces himself as Count Caribbean. The Count cheerfully invites them to take a seat. Luke apologizes for his own father's absence, but the Count waves it off, explaining that he knows the Duke already came by, said hello, and left. While the Count seems unbothered, Luke is internally aghast that the head of a high-ranking noble family would not even attend his own son's marriage meeting. He watched Karen, who wondered aloud if his father's intimidating reputation had been too much for her. Internally, he felt a flicker of relief, admitting to himself that he didn't mind his father's absence at all. Turning his full attention to Count Caribbean, he decided to be direct. He stated that, as the second son, he was in a position to offer himself, and formally asked if it would be acceptable for him to marry into the Caribbean family. In response, a brilliant, toothy grin spread across the Count's face. He declared with booming enthusiasm that the Caribbean family would gladly welcome Luke. His enthusiastic acceptance prompted Karen to shyly ask Luke if he was truly all right with someone like her. Before he could reply, her father interjected loudly, announcing that Karen had already told him how much she loved Luke, causing the girl to flinch with embarrassment. He acknowledged her father's words, but his expression grew serious. He admitted his concern, revealing that he knew some girls mocked Karen for her appearance, even though he was the one who had confessed his feelings first. His thoughts immediately turned to a memory of his sister, Iris, at age 12. He recalled how harshly she treated any girl she didn't consider beautiful, realizing with a grimace that she was the one the Count was referring to. He privately considered that while Karen was a little chubby, she was still developing and he found her quite cute. Though he admitted to himself that her cooking and status were the primary draw, he was sure she was a good person. The Count, misinterpreting his contemplation, expressed immense gratitude that Luke could see Karen's inner beauty, a notion Luke didn't bother to correct. Changing the subject, the Count explained his family's origins as fishermen and traders, overseeing a wide range of maritime businesses. He mentioned that everyone in the family, himself included, goes to sea frequently, and then turned to Luke, questioning if his seemingly delicate constitution could handle the sun. Before he could answer, Karen chimed in, explaining that since she has no brothers, he would inherit the house. She added cheerfully that if a younger brother were ever born, she would gladly give up the position to him and use her cooking skills to open a restaurant. He blushed slightly at the thought, then addressed the Count's concern. He assured him that he trains and is sturdier than he looks. And as for the son, he had the perfect countermeasure ready, a bottle of SPF 50 sunscreen. He considered the practicalities of life at sea, realizing he wouldn't get seasick and could summon Val to carry luggage, leaving him free to simply sleep. With his plan sorted, he decided it was time to depart from his new father-in-law's company. As they prepared to leave, Count Caribbean formally entrusted his daughter to Luke, telling the two of them to enjoy their time together. Luke respectfully addressed him as father-in-law and offered his thanks. The Count then waved them off with a booming laugh, remarking on how hasty Luke was. Once they were alone, Karen suddenly turned to Luke with wide, determined eyes. She called his name to get his attention and declared with surprising intensity that she wanted to become pretty enough to stand by his side. He responded calmly, noting that he had overheard she'd been concerned with her appearance since she was little. He added that he already found her quite cute, but Karen quickly insisted that wasn't what she meant. She explained that there was one person, her sister, Iris, who always made her feel as though she didn't care about her appearance, and that she constantly felt her sister's watchful eye on her. It was for this reason, she said, that she wanted his help to grow beautiful. Luke accepted, warning her that he was a strict teacher, but Karen affirmed she was prepared to learn. With a confident smile, he assured her that she could indeed become beautiful, revealing that there was actually a very easy way. Karen looked at him in astonishment, questioning if it was truly possible for someone like her. He briefly considered that he could use his sleep magic and Val to easily help her diet, but he understood that simply getting thin wasn't what she truly wanted. Karen, meanwhile, remained puzzled, quietly repeating his words about an easy way. Realizing this wasn't the right time or place for such a lesson, he suggested they go somewhere else. Seizing the moment, Karen asked if he would just call her Karen, and in return, requested permission to call him Luke. He readily agreed. Having settled that, he decided they should continue their talk in his room. He turned to Syrup, who had appeared beside him, and instructed her to make sure nobody spied on them. The maid acknowledged his command. He began by explaining that his diet method utilizes magic. Karen reacted with surprise, questioning the use of magic. He admitted that he might be overreacting, but after hearing about her older sister, he felt compelled to get straight to the point. He clarified that, simply put, it's a way to exercise while sleeping. Karen found the concept difficult, so he promised to explain everything in turn. He revealed that his attributes are sleep and sloth, which prompted Karen to exclaim in amazement that he possesses too. She readily agreed to use his sleep attribute for her diet. He continued, stating the process was quite simple. He would use his sleep attribute to put her to sleep, at which point a being he calls Val would enter her body. Val, a form of attributeless magic, would then perform a set of movements using her body. Karen, looking at the amorphous magical creature, found it quite cute. Karen correctly identified Val as a self-sufficient spell. Pleased, he confirmed her deduction and announced he would first demonstrate the process on himself. He then set a sleep timer for 1 minute, instructing Val to perform a light workout for Karen to observe. A minute later, he awoke. Karen was visibly stunned, her hands covering her mouth in awe. She exclaimed that it was amazing, that he had moved with the grace and precision of a martial artist. Wiping a bit of sweat from his brow, he marveled at the fact that he had no memory of the workout at all. He assured Karen that all she needed to do was allow Val to enter her body. She looked on with a mix of hope and uncertainty, asking if she could truly do it as well. As Karen prepared to change clothes, Syrup asked if she was any good at exercising. Karen admitted with some embarrassment that she was bad at it. Undeterred, she eagerly agreed to try the method. After changing, Karen agreed to Luke's suggestion of starting with a light exercise to acclimate her body. She then flexed a bicep, proudly declaring that she was quite strong. The contradiction registered with Luke. She possessed strength but lacked coordination for exercise. The light exercise left her utterly exhausted, sprawled on a couch and covered in sweat. Luke stood over her, asking how she felt. Barely able to speak, she questioned if what she had just endured could truly be called a light workout. She groans in agony, her entire body aching from the exertion. Luke supports her, explaining that they will focus on basic exercises to build her stamina. He offers to use healing magic, but cautions that some muscle pain will remain. He encourages her to persevere. Despite her exhaustion, Karen steels herself, promising to do her best. With the exercises complete, Luke moves on to the next phase, a beauty regimen. He demonstrates with a large ball of foam, instructing her to lather the soap well and avoid rubbing it harshly, as the foam itself will absorb the dirt. Karen listens intently, holding a smaller piece of soap. She follows his instructions, gently washing her face with the rich lather. He then tells her to rinse thoroughly, reminding her to be careful not to apply pressure whenever she touches her face. The lesson then proceeds to makeup. Karen stares at the array of bottles and cosmetics, her eyes wide with fascination. Luke observes her brimming curiosity and quick learning, finding her enthusiasm rewarding. Finally, they move on to nutrition. Luke explains that a beautiful body cannot be built without the proper nutrients. The idea sparks Karen's interest. She realizes that with her cooking skills, she could surely create delicious diet-friendly meals using the right ingredients. From that moment on, she becomes completely engrossed in developing new diet dishes, beginning with simple recipes like soybean plates and steamed chicken salad. Her passion results in a massive feast spread across the table. Luke expresses his delight at getting to enjoy Japanese cuisine, such as miso soup and natto hamburgers, in this new world. However, He gently chides her for preparing far too much. She agrees that overeating is unhealthy, regardless of the food's quality, but explains she couldn't bear to throw it away after wanting to experiment with so many recipes. Hearing this, he suggests donating the surplus to one of the nearby orphanages. Her eyes sparkle at the idea. She realizes it's the perfect solution. She can continue her culinary research, and any food they cannot eat themselves can be given to an orphanage. She threw herself into her new routine, preparing an even greater variety of dishes and personally delivering them to different orphanages each day. It was, she thought with a quiet sigh of satisfaction, a perfect arrangement for everyone. As they rode in a carriage on another such day, Luke asked if she was heading out again. She reminded him that it was his idea, though he grumbled, admitting he'd much rather be relaxing at home. His reluctance was understandable when they arrived. Stepping inside one of the buildings, he recoiled in disgust from the filth and vermin, muttering that the orphanages were so unhygienic he just couldn't get used to them. The state of the building was only part of the problem. A crowd of children immediately swarmed Karen, joyfully shouting her name. With so many orphans unable to use magic to clean themselves, even a powerful cleaning spell would be a temporary fix at best. Amidst the clamor, one young girl pushed through with a desperate plea, explaining that her little brother had fallen and wouldn't wake up. She confessed that she couldn't use healing magic and revealed that while the church managed the orphanage, the priests only ever appeared to collect money. The girl's story left Karen stunned. Seeing her distress, Luke gently cupped her cheek, assuring her it was all right and that he would go check on the boy. He added quietly that he really didn't like the church in this place. He led the way to a small, grim room where a young boy lay in bed, his breathing shallow and labored. It was clear he might have pneumonia, and the squalid conditions were certainly no place for a sick person to recover. Without hesitation, he knelt beside the bed, holding his hands over the ailing child. He focused his intent, picturing the boy's breathing becoming steady and normal, and then invoked his magic with a single word. Heal. A soft glow enveloped the boy. Moments later, his sister was overcome with relief, thanking Luke profusely. Her joy quickly turned to concern as she asked what the cost would be. Luke's answer was simple. Nothing. He calmly explained that as the son of a duke, he had no need for money. He had merely taken the opportunity to practice his magic. He noticed Karen's flustered expression as she asked if he truly didn't need any money. He reassured her, explaining that he was the one who should be thanking her, as he now understood how to heal that particular illness. As Karen bowed deeply, stammering her thanks, he silently reflected on her cleverness, musing that her life would be much easier in a better environment. Turning his attention, he called out for syrup, and his beastman made appear at his side, ready to receive his orders. Following her master's instructions, Syrup found herself in the office of the orphanage director. With a cheerful and knowing smile, she proposed a simple idea. Since the Duke possessed an abundance of wealth, it only made sense for them to make use of some of it. Back in the main room, Luke presented Karen with a heavy pouch containing 50 gold coins. He instructed her that this sum should be sufficient to improve the orphanage's hygiene and begin the children's education. Admitting he found such matters a hassle, he forbade her from refusing the task. With a slight hesitation, Karen accepted, formally addressing him as young Master Disgustos. A sly, calculating smile spread across his face. He internally confessed that while he had only tagged along at first, the situation had become quite interesting. The orphanage, he realized, provided a wealth of opportunities to test his healing magic on a variety of ailments: poison, illness, wounds, and even injuries from monster attacks. Luke, now 14 years old, reflects on the state of his life. For the past 3 years, since his engagement to Karen, he has enjoyed a peaceful existence. Syrup takes care of most of his needs. Karen provides his meals every day, and he has consistently used Val to maintain his health and appearance. His ideal, slothful life is steadily improving. He acknowledges that thanks to Karen, he has experienced many different things. However, a sense of melancholy settles in as he realizes that these peaceful days are approaching their end. The reason for this impending change is that Karen will soon be attending the academy, where she will live in the dormitories starting this spring. Because of this, he resolves to spend as much of their remaining time together as possible. He glances toward the door, noting that she has not yet arrived. Realizing she is late, he suspects he knows why and decides he will have to go find her himself. As he makes his way to the main house, he is surprised by an uncommon sight. Testa Hugelo Disgustos, 19 years of age, is present at this hour. He walks past Testa, who ignores him completely. Luke internally notes that even though he is now taller than the older man, Testa doesn't seem to care in the slightest. Dismissing the cold encounter, he refocuses his attention on his original goal. He is certain he knows where to find Karen. His search leads him outside, where he spots her sitting gracefully amidst a garden of flowers. He has found her. He takes a moment to admire her transformation. Her diet was a remarkable success, and she is now widely regarded as a great beauty, praised for both her appearance and her newfound femininity. As he approaches the table, however, he is taken aback. Karen is not alone. She is having tea with Iris, who looks up and greets him with a surprised, "Oh my, Luke." He found his voice, wondering aloud if he could borrow Karen. Iris Hugelo Disgustos, however, met his interruption with a cool smile, asking what brought him to her. She accused him of trying to break up her tea party, adding that Karen had come to see her, not the other way around. In response, he stated plainly that he had come to take back his kidnapped fiancée. The statement wiped the smile from Iris's face, her expression hardening instantly. Her gaze was intense, a silent testament to her reputation. It was said that any man who met her eyes would inevitably want to become her plaything. But her power had no effect on him. Karen apologized, explaining she had also wanted to talk with Iris. He noted that, as far as he could see, Karen was far more appealing anyway. He reassured Karen that it wasn't her fault, then turned his attention back to Iris. Addressing her as Nay-san, he asked if she had enjoyed herself enough. She told him to leave them alone, suggesting he could talk with Karen as much as he wanted once they were at the academy together. He protested that this wasn't fair, as he wouldn't be attending until the following year, and this was his only chance. Caught between them, Karen became flustered, thinking to herself how wonderful it was to have two beautiful people fighting over her. Iris noted her cute reaction, but dismissed Luke's behavior as simple, stubborn sulking. He bowed his head slightly, conceding that he had no choice. He then told Iris that she was ruining her beautiful face with such a frightening expression. With a disarming smile, he reminded her that she would also be attending the academy soon, and encouraged her to do her best. Having smoothed things over, he took Karen's hand and declared they were leaving. He reasoned internally that since he rarely saw Iris, it wouldn't hurt to earn some points with her. As they departed, Karen offered a hasty apology to a surprised Iris. He found himself captivated by Iris's intense gaze. She declared him the only man whose beauty could rival her own, her voice a breathy whisper as she confessed her desire for him. Luke's breath hitched, his face flushing as he uttered her name. But this was merely a memory, a lingering echo from months past. In the present, with Karen having departed for the academy, Luke had become a recluse. Lying in bed, he was roused from his thoughts by Syrup, who asked which book he would like for the day. He, however, had other plans. "We're going on an outing today," he announced, startling Syrup, who remarked on how unusual this was. Luke mused internally that he rarely had a reason to leave. Syrup handled the shopping. Merchants came to him, and he had no friends to visit aside from Alsan. She voiced her surprise again, but then eagerly asked to accompany him, regardless of the weather. "As you wish," he replied simply. Soon, they were on their way, with Syrup expertly driving the ducal carriage, her beastman features concealed beneath a dark cloak. The journey made Luke nostalgic, recalling how Karen used to take them on similar trips. As he was lost in the thought of how much he missed her, the carriage came to a halt. They had arrived. He remarked on the speed of their travel. Syrup explained that the ducal carriage is never impeded, a testament to its authority. Stepping onto the street, Luke considered his purpose for this rare outing, wondering what exactly he would find. Their destination was an imposing, multi-story building known as the Great Mado Shop. A massive department store, recognizable from the world of the game, it was a place to acquire everything from basic items and equipment to gifts meant for potential romantic partners. As they were welcomed inside, Luke turned to his companion with a generous offer. "You can buy whatever you want to, Syrup," he said. She thanked him gratefully. They were promptly met by a well-dressed man who identified Luke immediately. "You must be the young son of Duke Descustos," he stated, introducing himself as Morsky Mado, the owner of the establishment. Luke noted silently that for a merchant, information was indeed a powerful weapon. The owner then led them into a lavishly appointed private area. "Please sit down," he offered, gesturing toward the plush seating of the VIP room. He is seated in the private room when Morsky Mado, acknowledging that dealing with an old man might be dull, offers to introduce his daughter instead. A service cart stands nearby, ready for their requests. Following his father's introduction, a vibrant young woman steps forward. She introduces herself as Akari Mado, Morsky's 14-year-old daughter. Luke immediately recognizes her as a key figure from the game, one of the main love interests on the merchant path. Akari greets both Luke and Syrup warmly, expressing her hope that they will get along and noting her pleasure that Luke is not rude to Syrup, a beast man. Luke and Syrup then formally introduce themselves. She then turns her full attention to business, asking what he is looking for today. Internally, Luke considers this a stroke of luck. He had hoped to see her before starting at the academy, but never expected she would be the one to personally attend to him. He requests that she show him her recommendations, perhaps a beauty regimen or anything else she finds convenient. Delighted by the open-ended request, Akari claps her hands together and enthusiastically agrees to show him everything she has. True to her word, she begins her presentation with a smile. Accompanied by witty and engaging commentary, she introduces the first item, a magic hairdryer. After purchasing nearly everything Akari presented, Luke beams with satisfaction over his acquisitions. He then turns to Syrup, who has been standing by quietly, and asks if there is anything she would like for herself. Syrup seems taken aback, murmuring that there isn't, really. She elaborates, explaining that because they almost never go shopping together, she would be happy to receive anything he chose to give her as a gift. Hearing this, Akari steps in, presenting a small box to Syrup. Inside rests a beautiful red choker. Syrup's eyes widen in astonishment as she gasps, finding it wonderful. Despite her admiration for the gift, she becomes flustered, protesting to Luke that she is merely a servant and cannot accept such a thing. Ignoring her objection, he calmly informs Akari that they will purchase it. He then turns and offers the box to Syrup. He explains it as a token of his gratitude for her constant care, then gently asks if he was mistaken in thinking she liked it. Her initial hesitation gives way to a resigned, knowing smile. It can't be helped, she decides. He gently fastens the red choker around her neck, covering her eyes as he asks for her opinion. As she looks at her reflection, Akari Mado enthusiastically exclaims that it suits her very well. Syrup, blushing, can only agree that it is wonderful. She touches the new accessory, a pleased blush on her cheeks, as she asks how she looks. The choker, she notes, truly emphasizes her beautiful white hair. He watches her with a gentle, satisfied smile, glad that she likes his gift. Their shopping concluded, Akari Mado sees them off to their carriage. She reflects on the satisfying trip and expresses her hope for their continued patronage. As the carriage pulls away, he muses to himself that doing things like this every once in a while might not be a bad idea. The carriage makes its way through the city streets. He knows he will have to leave home and go to the academy next year, and decides he needs to experience the world a little before then. Back in his room, he resolves to settle something before leaving home. He must face the reason why the original Luke ended up as a gross, fat toad. Lying in bed, he admits he already has a good guess. Though he considers it a pain, he knows he must confront it. The slothful path, he thinks, is a difficult one. A stark contrast defines Luke's existence. On one side, the bloated, disfigured face he now bears. On the other, the handsome, healthy young man he once was. This discrepancy in his face and figure has been a source of constant, nagging doubt. He gazes at his reflection, pondering how things turn out this way. It's difficult to reconcile his current state with the memory of the well-put-together boy he used to be. His thoughts drift to potential causes. He had suspected the food of this world wasn't suitable for his body, even looking into allergies or a weak constitution, but he never found an answer. The ingredients were always the same. Could a simple hedonistic lifestyle truly be all it took to cause such a drastic transformation? As he mulls over food, ingredients, and preparation, an idea forms. Perhaps Karen might know more about this. He reviews a written testimony from Karen. She appears nervous as she writes her conclusion. The properties he described are almost exclusively indicative of toxins. He reads her words, which explain that such substances can be used medicinally, but depending on the method, can also produce lethal effects. The possibility solidifies in his mind. If it is poison, it might finally explain the bizarre change in his appearance. This is a lead worth pursuing. He then turns to Syrup for her testimony, asking what he was like as a child. She recalls that until he was 4, he was a cute child who ate and slept well. He questions if there was anything physically unusual about him, but she confirms there was nothing aside from his delicate skin. She continues, explaining that his condition became unstable for about a year following a birthday dinner. He had been enjoying the meal with such delight, so she was taken aback when he suddenly collapsed, sending the maids into a frenzy. He recalls that was when he ran out of mana. Syrup adds that things only began to improve when he turned 6. He presses for a crucial detail. Who prepared his meals back then? Syrup informs him that they had a chef, but he was forced to retire immediately after that specific dinner. From that point on, the steward took over. With that final piece of information, it all comes together. His eyes narrow with cold certainty. It would have to have been the head steward who made the poison meals. He had found his answer. Entering the room, he calmly greeted the head steward, who sat bound to a chair, his head wrapped in bandages. The man flinched in surprise. He began his interrogation, explaining that he had been doing a lot of thinking. He posed a question to the steward. Why did he become known as the gross, fat toad? If he had developed normally, he reasoned he never should have reached that point. He then pointedly thanked the steward for preparing his meals every day. The food, however, was the problem. He let a large, gelatinous mass of it fall to the floor with a wet slap, remarking that it probably never quite agreed with his constitution. The reason for this was simple. He looked directly at the bound man and stated plainly that someone had been poisoning him. The steward recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. The steward immediately broke, shouting that he had been assigned the task by the head of the Disgusto's family. Luke calmly asked if he was acting on his father's orders. He mused that his family likely didn't care enough to get their own hands dirty. He then revealed a crucial detail. All along, he had been neutralizing the poison with healing magic. He supposed it must have been quite frustrating for them when he refused to die and instead grew even healthier. With his knowledge laid bare, he directly confronted the terrified man, asking for confirmation. He was the one poisoning the food, wasn't he? The steward could only stammer in fear. The man's resolve shattered completely. He bowed his head low and begged for forgiveness. Luke noted with some surprise how quickly he had confessed. He sighed, finding the response boring. He admitted that he would have been more eager for revenge if the steward had put up a fight. He then stated he would grant forgiveness, but not without a condition. His condition was not death. He clarified that he had no plans to kill the steward, but would instead use him as a test subject for his magic. As a glowing, complex magical array formed in his hand, he called it a little punishment. He completes the spell, his voice echoing in the swirling darkness as he grants the head steward the gift of sloth. The old man convulses, enveloped by the magical energy. The steward's eyes flutter open, but they are vacant and unfocused. Luke observes the result, realizing for the first time what his curse truly does to a person. He now understands the effect completely. With a calm expression, he dismisses the steward, telling him he can get back to work. The old man remains seated, limp and unresponsive in the armchair. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, Duke Disgustos sits alone in the dark. He stares forward, acknowledging a single, clear thought. his enemy is his own son. Luke reflects on his strategy. He knows his father wouldn't care if he simply fired service workers like the steward, but provoking his father's direct hostility would cause immense trouble. That is why he chose to incapacitate him instead. His plan is not to eliminate his father's pieces from a board, but to simply render his pawns powerless, leaving them alive but utterly useless. Later, as he walks through a drawing room, Syrup calls out to him, asking where he went. He gives a simple reply, just out. She smiles, saying she had already assumed he would be attending the academy, and asks if he had considered not going. Leaning in close with a playful look, he turns the question back on her, asking if she would be happy if he told her he was going. He admits to himself that not going was a plausible choice, given the high chance he'll be killed at the academy. But his path was already set. He was just toying with the idea. Syrup leans against him, content, and says that if possible, she would be happy to remain by his side. She closes her eyes, a serene smile on her face. She understands that as long as her master is alive, her own house is no longer safe, giving her no choice but to move. It is a price she is willing to pay, all to protect her life of leisure with him. Luke's strategy was clear in his mind. He would operate from the shadows, subtly aiding the game's protagonist to orchestrate the inevitable conflict between the royal family and the nobility. Then, when the time was right, he would crush the leader of the nobles, his own father, Duke Disgustos. He reflected on the difficult role he had been reincarnated into. While this path seemed to offer the highest chance of survival, it was far from easy. Still, the fact that this was the world of a game he loved brought him a certain satisfaction. With a newfound determination hardening his expression, he resolved to play the part of Luke for all it was worth. He was not about to sit back and allow himself to be killed. 1 year later, his path led him to the entrance exam grounds of the Alessida's Royal Academy. Dressed in a smart uniform, he bid farewell to Syrup, who stood by their carriage. She told him to take care of himself, and he confidently reassured her that he would. Within the vast stone amphitheater, an instructor addressed the assembled applicants. The entrance exam, he explained, would consist of 3 distinct tests: magic, practical combat, and a subject evaluation. As he stood among the other hopefuls, a nearby student muttered a derogatory question about a beast man. Luke overheard, but paid it no mind, reminding himself that the top performers receive scholarships regardless of their identity. His plan was simple, not to stand out or try too hard. His attention was suddenly pulled away when Syrup, watching from the stands, pointed towards the arena floor. She asked if the practical exams were beginning, and a flicker of surprise crossed Luke's face. He turned his gaze to the combatant, now taking their position in the center of the arena. A jolt of recognition shot through him. The applicant was a beast man with vibrant green hair and striking emerald eyes. Luke knew her instantly. Adventurer Ruby, one of the heroines from the game. She exploded into motion, a green blur that easily evaded the instructor's lunging punch. The blow missed entirely, cracking the stone ground where she had stood just a moment before. She moved with blinding speed, a whirlwind of kicks and strikes that overwhelmed her opponent with sheer force. Her combination of a beastman's powerful constitution and unorthodox techniques left the examiners impressed. As her match concluded, Luke, watching from the sidelines, felt a pang of disappointment that it was just getting good. An examiner then called out for the next participant. The next examinee, the prophesied Sword Emperor, stepped forward. He held a small, quivering creature in his hand, his expression one of sheer annoyance as he complained about what a pain this was. His attitude prompted an examiner to question if his magic was elementless. In response, he unleashed a torrent of raw power. The ground erupted in a violent explosion of rock and dust, shattering the arena floor. The sheer force of the blast stunned the onlookers. An examiner shouted for him to stop, declaring it was enough. As Adventurer Ruby watched the display, her eyes wide with surprise. Her surprise quickly morphed into a thoughtful curiosity, a small smile playing on her lips as she assessed the boy's power. Her assessment was proven correct as the Sword Emperor's opponent, thoroughly defeated, raised a hand in surrender. The following day, the exam results were posted. Luke sat comfortably at home with Syrup, who held his acceptance letter. He recalled his excellent grades and incredible exam results from the game's world, feeling no anxiety about failing. With his place at the academy secured, and the Sword Emperor also among the new students, the stage was set. The adult romance strategy simulation was about to begin. Dressed in a crisp new uniform, Luke Disgustos admires his own reflection, acknowledging his newfound beauty. As he prepares to depart, his maid, Syrup, informs him that the carriage is ready. She marvels at his appearance, declaring she has never seen such a perfect man. He thanks her, recognizing that this day marks the beginning of his new life. His thoughts turn to his destination, the Alessida's Royal Academy. He knows it to be the oldest and most prestigious academy in the entire kingdom, a grand stage where countless ambitions and schemes are set to intersect. He reflects on the student body. While nearly all nobles attend this school, it has recently begun accepting the most talented commoners in an effort to recruit more students, creating a diverse and competitive environment. This diverse education is necessary because the kingdom is plagued by numerous dungeons, from which monsters tend to pour out. Consequently, learning proper self-defense is considered an essential part of one's schooling, with the academy focusing on 3 core subjects: battle, magic, and academic study. Beyond its martial and academic pursuits, the academy also serves as a premier research facility. It places a special emphasis on magic development, and Luke anticipates that being taught by legendary mages will be an interesting experience. He understands that success here depends on two key factors: raising one's personal stats and interacting with the various love interests. The story and the people he can meet will change based on these stats. To achieve a specific outcome, he knows he must carefully manage which events or flags he triggers. With this knowledge, he forms a clear strategy. He will use the memories of his previous life to support the story's protagonist, all while playing the part of the villain, Luke, who is always nearby. His primary objective is to avoid the standard routes that lead to his character's death. He considers, however, that events may already be set to unfold very differently from the game he remembers. After all, he is no longer the fat, ugly toad his character was meant to be. He steels his resolve, knowing he must survive for the sake of those who depend on him. Pulled from his thoughts, he hears Syrup ask if he has remembered everything. He smiles, reassuring her that she prepared all for him. Despite his calm demeanor, Syrup's face is etched with worry. Her worry bursts forth as she laments that she wanted to go with him as his attendant to clean his dormitory. She is only prevented by what she calls a stupid academy rule. Attendants may not be more than 2 years older or younger than their student. Luke observes internally that her powerful sense of duty has only grown over the years. As she held his hands, Luke explained the academy's policy. While students were permitted to have attendants, Syrup's age, 7 years his senior, unfortunately disqualified her. He expressed his regret, telling her he would have been happy to have her by his side, but it simply couldn't be helped. He continued, acknowledging that it was common for children to have attendants of a similar age for this very reason, but he knew of no one who could fill that role for him. Syrup listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She voiced her concerns, noting that he always went at his own pace, and that she was worried about whether the attendant his father assigned would be able to do a proper job. Luke tried to reassure her, insisting that it would all work out and be fine. He smiled, attempting to soothe her worries by reminding her that he could take care of himself. He added that Karen would also be at the academy, which seemed to offer some comfort, though he still trailed off with uncertainty. His reassurances, however, did little to placate her. With a pained and determined expression, she stated plainly that her desire was simply to take care of him, a declaration that caught him by surprise. Her earnest plea brought a memory to his mind. Syrup had watched over him ever since he was a small infant. Looking down at their joined hands, a wave of gratitude washed over him, and he quietly thanked her. He reflected on his childhood, a time when his family showed him no love or affection. It was Syrup who had more than made up for that absence, providing the care he so desperately needed. To him, she was his one and only family. The thought solidified in his mind. She had always been his exclusive attendant, but he realized that recently she had been taking on more and more work, making her days harder. A sense of urgency filled him as he called out her name. Before she could respond, he pulled her into a sudden, tight embrace. He told her she had done more for him than he could ever hope to repay, but he made a solemn promise to reward her one day for everything. He held her close, his grip firm with conviction. Though he knew it would be difficult, he silently reaffirmed his vow, his determination absolute. He would find a way. He held her close, the warmth of their embrace a final comfort before his departure. He would miss her, he admitted, and she confessed she would miss him too. Pulling back slightly, he asked her to take care of the house while he was gone. He promised to return for a short time at the end of the year, asking her to endure their separation until then. She simply agreed. With their farewells said, his carriage departed, pulling away from the home they shared. He knew they wouldn't be together for a while, but this time apart only strengthened his resolve to treasure Syrup more in the future, after his time at the academy, and forevermore. He had made a promise before leaving, a declaration of his intent. He told her that when he graduated and left the territory, she was to come with him. Syrup, taken aback, asked if he was truly sure. He looked at her with unwavering certainty, vowing that he would never let her go. He was glad to hear her confirm that she wouldn't leave his side either. Syrup added one condition to her promise, as long as Karen was okay with it. Building on their shared future, he then proposed that they become a proper family. The suggestion stunned her for a moment before her face lit up with a blush in pure joy. She agreed without hesitation, a reaction that made him realize just how much he loved her. And so, he arrived at the academy main street. A hooded figure, Syrup, saw him off, wishing a nice stay. Waving one last time, Luke turned and walked through the grand gates, ready for the next chapter of his life. Near the Dura reception, where he was meant to meet fellow new students, a young woman approached him directly. She called him by name, and as he looked at her, he felt a faint sense of recognition, wondering if they had met before. The girl smiled, apologizing for the late introduction. She announced her name as Libera Glicko, the 15-year-old daughter of Baron Malsa Glicko, the director of the Ministry of Magic. She explained that she knew who he was immediately from her father's description. The name struck him. Malsan's daughter. He found the connection interesting, recalling that the only parent of a love interest he knew was Morsky. Libera then revealed the true reason for her presence. She was the attendant his father had arranged. This, she stated, changed things. She insisted he drop the honorifics and simply call her Libera. He notes that Libera likes magic, something her father, Malsa, had mentioned. Libera's face lights up as she confirms this, declaring that she loves it and dreams of getting a job at the Ministry of Magic in the future. He asks why people would make fun of her for that ambition. Libera explains that it's a common reaction when a girl expresses a desire to join the ministry. Unfazed, Luke looks at her with conviction and states that he knows she'll be able to do it. His words of support continue as he tells her she is talented and works hard, assuring her she will do fine. Her serious expression melts away, replaced by a beaming, heartfelt smile as she thanks him. Buoyed by his kindness, she declares her desire to get closer to him. Luke seems surprised by this, but she clarifies that as his attendant, she wants to take care of him. He insists he can manage on his own, but she is firm. Internally, she wonders why he seems to like her so much. Her demeanor becomes intense. Pushing her glasses up, she states with gravity that his magic is an art form. At that moment, a look of sudden understanding crosses Luke's face. He finally places her. In the game, Libera is known as a magic maniac, a witch whose obsessive love for magic often leads to trouble. She's a character one can only encounter by raising their magic statistic. Realizing her intensity, he decides it's best to change the subject. He suggests they finish the dorm application first and save the magic talk for later. However, Libera briskly informs him that the paperwork is already done and dealt with, leaving him momentarily speechless. With that task out of the way, she immediately pivots, asking if they should discuss magic with the tea they have. She eagerly suggests they find a place that serves tea, as it's the most suitable setting. The scene shifts to them seated at an outdoor cafe, the fragrant aroma filling the air. As he sips his tea, he remarks on how delicious it is and thanks her for always sending some. Libera, however, cuts straight to the point, asking if she can give her personal opinion on his original spell. He calmly tells her to go ahead. Given the opening, she launches into a fervent, rapid-fire analysis of his attributeless magic, gesturing with animated excitement. As he listens, Luke quietly wonders if her intense fascination is due to the influence of her father, Malsa. He listens as Libera concludes her initial assessment. She finds his Val to be highly knowledgeable in all aspects of magic, with limitless potential for use, though she notes there is still room for improvement. He considers that Libera might make a good research partner. In his mind, he pictures both her and her father, Malsa, eagerly anticipating the results of their collaboration, their excitement mirroring each other. The two sit together at an outdoor table, a quiet moment passing between them as they finish their drinks. After a moment, Libera announces that it's almost time for the main event and that they should get moving. They rise from their seats and begin to walk. They arrive at the Great Hall of the Magic Academy. The vast auditorium is already filled with students seated for the entrance ceremony. His gaze sweeps across the crowd, and he realizes he recognizes faces scattered all over the hall, key figures from the world he remembers. Suddenly, he feels an intense, piercing stare directed at him, startling him out of his observations. His head snaps up towards a balcony overlooking the hall, where he sees the source of the unwavering gaze, the Sword Emperor. The young man's eyes are locked onto him from above. A flicker of recognition crosses the Sword Emperor's face as he realizes who he is looking at. His intense gaze remains fixed on Luke. The Sword Emperor wonders if he's been noticed, his expression hardening as a single thought surfaces. He has a really bad feeling about this. His intense gaze bore down on Luke, who met it with a steady, thoughtful expression. This should have been their first meeting, Luke mused internally, yet the other boy's reaction suggested otherwise. It seemed he was already known to the Sword Emperor. At what appears to be an academy assembly, Libera Glicko notices Luke Disgustos' troubled expression and asks what the matter is. Luke wonders aloud why a particular boy is staring at him, as if he were an archenemy. When Libera asks who he means, Luke simply says, "Oh." Libera explains that the boy, a knight apprentice named Dan, serves the Marshall family, who lead the royal faction, while the Disgustos family leads the opposing noble faction. Luke grimly realizes they were destined to be enemies from birth. Libera adds that she has heard Linshin-sama, the one sitting beside Dan, is highly accomplished in martial arts. She continues her detailed report, identifying the woman as Linshin of House Marshall. Libera notes that Dan is her attendant and his appraisal is growth. She seems to know everyone's attributes, remarking that Linshin's appraisal is the attribute shield, and that while she isn't skilled with magic, she is like a walking attribute dictionary. As Libera speaks, Luke's mind drifts to his own knowledge of Linshin. He internally categorizes her as one of the pity love interests, someone a player can marry even if they fail to win over any others. He pictures her future as a good wife who deeply loves her husband and children. He recalls another potential path in the story. If someone other than the protagonist captures her affections, Luke himself is the one to do so. In that scenario, she appears later as Luke's wife, and consequently, an enemy to the protagonist. Luke reflects that the inevitable fight against her in that route truly showcases her essential beauty. He considers it praiseworthy that her pure and devoted personality ultimately becomes her downfall. His thoughts then shift to Dan's history. Though a commoner, Dan's father was an honorable knight capable of using attribute magic. Following in his footsteps, Dan has been battling monsters and practicing since childhood, which allowed him to enter the academy as Linshin's attendant. This history fuels Dan's ambition to carry on his father's legacy at the academy and become a knight of House Marshall. Luke understands that this is the very reason Dan harbors such hatred for the Disgustos family, the leaders of the noble faction. The weight of this foreknowledge seems to weary Luke. He sighs, thinking what a pain it is, and anticipates that at this rate, another figure will likely come for him as well. His attention is drawn to the stage as the valedictorian speech is announced, and a girl named Irina, shyly born Alessidas, is called forward. As the first princess of the kingdom of Alessidas, Irina begins her long speech. Luke leans over to Libera, complaining of his boredom. Libera asks if he's interested in the princess, remarking on her beauty. Luke flatly denies it, thinking to himself that Irina is simply another love interest he must contend with during his school life. He considered Princess Irina. While she was certainly beautiful, he recalled having no interest in her during the game. After all, he was already accustomed to beauty, thanks to his sister Iris. His thoughts then turned to his current situation. He explained to Libera that, most importantly, he already had a fiancée and another person he loved. With two such people in his life, he couldn't afford to lower his guard. She asked if he intended to take a nap. He confirmed his interest in the pillow, but noted it wasn't a topic for their current location. Libera smiled, agreeing it sounded like a great idea and promising to wake him when the ceremony concluded. True to his word, he fell asleep in his seat as the ceremony proceeded. Libera watched over him, feeling a sense of relief that he was such an understanding person. When the hall emptied, she gently woke him. He stirred, asking if the ceremony was already over. As he sat up, pillow in hand, he inquired if this was the rumored one she had mentioned. He recalled her father mentioning that she was floating on a pillow when they first met, calling her a beautiful girl. Delighted by his directness, Libera thanked him, admitting she loves people who are honest about their interests. Luke remarked on how nice the pillow felt and offered to let her ride it when they had spare time. Her excitement was palpable, but she clenched her fists in frustration, lamenting their upcoming orientation. He noted to himself how deeply she must love magic. Seeing her distress, he declared they should get moving and promptly took her by the hand. Startled, she questioned the sudden gesture. He calmly told her it was fine. Blushing, she explained her surprise, admitting she had never held hands with a boy before and remarking on how soft his hand felt. A slight smile touched his lips as he replied that since he had stolen a maiden's first, he would have to take responsibility by escorting her to their classroom. With that, they walked down the corridor hand in hand. Unseen by them, Lynch and Marshall watched their departure, her expression hardening with intensity. She watched them walk away, hand in hand, her voice catching in her throat as she managed to call out a single word. Coward. He, however, remained unbothered, telling Libera to calm down and ignore the outburst. Libera, flustered, pulled her hand away, insisting they weren't doing anything wrong. She asked if he wasn't angry, but he calmly replied that he saw no point in wasting energy on it. Libera smiled, remarking that his response was very characteristic of him. He then turned to her with a slight smile, adding that he would much rather use that energy to talk with her instead. The comment caught Libera by surprise. Her surprise quickly turned into a bright, sparkling smile as she confessed that she also enjoyed talking with him. He confirmed that she found their conversations fun, and she happily agreed. With the matter settled, Luke declared it was time to get the orientation over with. They entered a vast lecture hall designated Class 0, finding it already bustling with students. He noted that everyone seemed to be present and that they would have to choose their seats. At the front of the hall, a man with slick back hair and glasses stepped forward to introduce himself as Glorn Research, the teacher for Class 0. Luke immediately recognized him. It was the same instructor who provided explanations in the game. Following his introduction, a woman with long, light hair announced that she was the assistant teacher, Silas. Luke's eyes widened in recognition. There she was, the witch who saw the abyss of magic. He recalled that she was an elf, hundreds of years old, and considered the most difficult love interest to pursue. As the orientation began, Glorin addressed the assembled students. He explained that everyone in Class 0, which included 3 scholarship students, had scored highly on the entrance exam. He emphasized that at the academy, status was irrelevant. They would all be judged solely on their abilities. One of the scholarship students, a girl named Muriel, listened intently. In response to this declaration, Muriel posed a question. If they were to be judged on ability alone, how would they determine their rank and compare themselves to others? Glorin praised it as an excellent question. Just then, Lynch and Marshall's hand shot up, and the teacher called upon her. Ignoring the previous question, Glorin Research enthusiastically presents a new device to the class. He declares that with this brand new invention, the Magic Watch, their potential could be fully measured. At his instruction, Libera prompts Luke to begin channeling his mana through the watch on his wrist. As he does, it emits a bright flash of light, startling him. Glorin continues his explanation, pointing emphatically. He clarifies that this new invention records each student's unique mana signature, allowing them to look up their grades and rank at will. A screen of light project from the watch, and Luke immediately recognizes it as the stat screen from the academy part of the game. It displays his name, Luke Hugolo Disgustos, age 15, level 1, and his assignment to Class 0. He turns to Libera, confirming his understanding that the recognition system is built on mana signatures. From the front of the room, Glorn affirms this, adding that while everyone's signature is recorded, only the individual can view their own finer details. Glorin's voice continues, explaining that the rank of their grades and their class are public for the faculty to see. As he speaks, Luke examines his own stats, noting his known magic types and seeing an unknown attribute, which he immediately guesses must be Val's. The public rankings for the class are revealed. Irina Alesitas holds the top position with overall rank 1, while Ruby is announced as practical rank 1 and holds the 10th spot overall. The list continues with Libera achieving magic rank 1 and Muriel securing studies rank 1. Libera gives a small, confident thumbs up. With the top spots announced, Glorin turns to Luke, who is rank 2, and asks for his thoughts. Luke simply smirks, thinking to himself that this result was just as he expected. His teacher, however, becomes swept up in his own passion. He launches into a speech about the unmatched universality of magic tools, proclaiming them the greatest resource for advancing humanity. Beside him, Silas tries in vain to get him to continue with the lesson. As the teacher's eccentric display concludes, Luke turns to the girl beside him. "How are your grades, Libera?" he asks. Libera, however, seems lost in her own thoughts, dismissing their instructor as a bizarre person and a magic maniac, not realizing Luke's question was directed at her. The classroom settles into a quiet attentiveness, the students all seated and facing forward, ready for the next part of the orientation. At the front of the room, assistant teacher Silas clears her throat to draw their focus. She announces that it is now cool time, and she will explain life at the academy, reminding them that they are free to choose whatever they want. She continues, a small flame flickering to life on her fingertip for emphasis. Their growth, she explains, is up to them. Ranks are not solely dependent on grades, so they should choose subjects they believe will help them in the future. Her expression hardens as she clenches a fist. She delivers a stern warning. If their grades drop, they will be mercilessly demoted to a lower class. However, she adds, there is one exception to this rule. The exception is a grand event held in a massive coliseum, the Sword Emperor Cup. Silas elaborates that this is the Academy's greatest event, held every year and attracting significant attention from the wider world. She stresses that even if a student's magic and academic grades are low, a strong performance there will allow them to remain in the higher classes. Her words resonate with the students, particularly Dan, whose expression becomes one of intense focus. Silas adds that the victor receives an honorary knight title and the right to challenge the winner of the National Sword Emperor Cup. She hopes they all attempt to win it at least once. For Dan, a clear goal forms in his mind. His first priority is to become a knight. The path to knighthood and nobility, with all its accompanying privileges like freedom of travel between territories, runs directly through winning the school Sword Emperor Cup. To facilitate this system, she concludes practice matches are permitted. These are also known by another name, ranking battles. She explains to the class that while the exact rules can be found on their watches, she will provide a brief overview. The most crucial detail, she stresses, is that a student's own rank is essential to even initiate a battle. Continuing her summary, she lays out the core principles. Lower-ranked students may challenge those of a higher rank. While the challenge party cannot refuse, the battle only commences once they accept. A victorious challenger seizes the opponent's rank and is subsequently transferred to the corresponding class. The rules continue, allowing for both individual and team battles at the discretion of the challenged. Participation is limited to one of each type per day, and a representative may fight in one's stead in case of illness. Prolonged refusal to fight results in a default loss. As Luke processes these details, he concludes that the system seems surprisingly lenient towards the loser. He recognizes this setup from a game he knows. The rules are specifically designed to pit him, the villain, against Dan, the protagonist. He understands his role is to be the first to fall in these ranking battles, a necessary scene to cement their fated rivalry. To him, however, this is merely a troublesome obligation. As Luke contemplates his predicament, Dan's hand shoots into the air, catching Muriel's eye. He calls out to the teacher, his voice eager. He asks when they can begin challenging others in ranking battles. Silas informs him that challenges can be issued as soon as they are registered on their watches. Without hesitation, Dan announces his intention to challenge someone immediately. He rises from his seat, his arm extended, pointing directly across the classroom. He bellows his challenge for all to hear, naming his target, Luke Hugelo Disgustos. The two boys lock eyes across the room. A soft chime sounds as the challenge officially appears on Luke's watch, and the battle commences. He understands immediately. This is the tutorial battle, the first scripted event for the villainous noble. The rivalry between Luke Disgustos and the knight apprentice Dan was born from a past conflict. In what was meant to be a tutorial fight, Luke, who had been enrolled in the academy for his magical talent alone, was soundly defeated. Since that day, he had relentlessly targeted Dan, seeking revenge for the humiliation. This history of animosity led to the current situation. While Dan enjoyed a fulfilling academy life, surrounded by friends, Luke was left to watch from the background, seething with resentment. But when Dan issued a formal challenge, Luke's reaction was unexpected. The original Luke would have flown into a frenzy at being challenged by a commoner. This Luke, however, simply dismissed the notion with a wave of his hand, stating plainly that he would not do it. His calm refusal stunned Dan, who immediately accused him of being scared. Unfazed, Luke, sitting at his desk, coolly stated that he was rank 2 and asked Dan for his rank. Dan retorted that it was just a pain. As Dan shouted in disbelief, Muriel could not contain her frustration. Dan tried to reason that he was rank 20, and that while Luke had an opportunity to increase his ranking, he himself had nothing to gain. Luke simply stated he had no desire to fight an idiot who couldn't understand something so simple. She marched forward, confronting Luke directly. She demanded to know why he wouldn't fight, shouting that as a noble of their glorious country, accepting a challenge should be a matter of course for him. Her initial anger, however, quickly gave way to a more reasoned, if flustered, approach. Acknowledging that he was a hot-headed and troublesome kid, she pointed out his grades were good and questioned him again. Luke simply replied, "I'll pass." With his final, simple refusal, Muriel walked away defeated, muttering about how troublesome it all was. As she left, Luke turned to Libera and quietly explained his creed, helping directly goes against his principle of laziness. He wishes to help, but only from behind the scenes. Just as the matter seemed settled, a new voice interjected. Princess Irina Alessidas stepped forward, surprising Muriel. Irina stated that she would very much like to see a fight between the two of them. Dan, with his excellent practical score, and Disgustos, with his excellent magic score. She addressed Luke directly, her tone calm but firm. She reminded him that refusing the challenge would only cause his rank to fall and urged him to follow the Academy's rules. Most importantly, she added, a noble of the country should guide the people. He internally seethes at the sheer annoyance of the situation as Princess Irina stands firm, declaring that it is his duty. She insists she will not permit him to refuse. She presses on, questioning if he heard the teacher's earlier declaration that Academy status is not determined by grades alone. He lets out a weary sigh, acknowledging to himself the difficulty of refusing both a princess and a duke's daughter. He truly cannot stand this princess. Beside him, Libera observes his frustration. From across the room, Dan's voice rings out in agreement, stating that the princess is right. He stands beside Muriel, observing the scene and concluding that Luke appears too weak to resist the flow of events on his own. Now, standing in the grand arena, Luke sighs again. He knows he has no choice, but laments what a pain it is, expressing his deep desire not to move so much. A small, translucent, magical familiar materializes beside him. As he walks with Libera, Dan, and Muriel, his familiar floats beside him, asking how he plans to lose and if he is alright. He resolves internally that to fulfill his role as Luke, he must lose this duel. Libera turns to him, mentioning she's heard of his great dislike for exercise. She warns him that his opponent, Dan, is a knight apprentice under Duke Marshall, one of the famous fighters, and his exam results suggest he is quite accustomed to combat. He responds with a confident smile, dismissing her concerns. It's fine, he assures her. This is a piece of cake for me. Her eyes widen behind her glasses, a glimmer of admiration shining as she takes in his unexpected confidence. She smiles, calling him a truly mysterious person. She points out that he has invented magic no one else has ever conceived of, yet he refused to fight, a strange choice for a noble. Luke simply asks if that is what she thinks. She quickly reassures him, explaining that she meant it as a compliment. He seems puzzled, questioning the connection between his actions. Libera elaborates, stating that nobles place a great deal of importance on their pride. He responds with a gentle smile, saying that as long as she doesn't dislike him, then everything is fine. The unexpected sentiment leaves Libera utterly stunned. Flustered, she clasps her face and vehemently denies it, shouting that she would never dislike him. Meanwhile, from a short distance away, Dan and Muriel observe the pair, their expressions stern and focused. They proceed to the grand arena. It's empty, stands looming over the dueling grounds. Luke remarks that he has not set foot in this place since the entrance examination. As they take their positions, their teacher, Glorn Research, approaches. He notes that their classmates are eagerly watching from the stands and asks if both combatants are ready. In response, Dan crouches into a ready stance while Luke watches him, his gaze sharp. He points a finger directly at Luke, declaring his intent to beat that rotten personality into shape. Dan reveals he watched Luke during the exam, seeing him do nothing but lie down the entire time. As Libera watches with concern, Luke calmly tells her to wait. Dan shouts at him not to be ignored, but Luke brushes him off with a dismissive yeah. With a cold look, he tells Dan to simply be grateful that he is even willing to fight him. His opponent demands to know his level. Luke pauses, recalling the concept, a number that increases with defeated monsters. He then casually states that since it was like a game, he maxed it out when he first encountered it, but hasn't paid it any mind since, believing strategy and basics to be far more important. He calmly states, it's 1. Dan, standing opposite him, can only utter a confused sound, completely baffled by the response. Dan's confusion hardens into disbelief and then rage. He clenches his fist, shouting that Luke has never even fought a monster before. He demands to know what being a noble has to do with fighting, declaring Luke to be even worse than he had imagined. Before the argument can escalate, a formal voice cuts through the tension. An announcer with a monocle declares the start of the duel, introducing challenger Dan and the defender of the higher rank, Luke Hugelo Disgustos. She commands them both to step forward. Heeding the call, Dan raises his sword, his expression a mask of grim determination. Luke, in contrast, offers a completely nonchalant suggestion that they have a nice fight. With the combatants in position, the announcer roars for the duel to begin. Dan immediately lunges forward, sword swinging. As the attack closes in, Luke reflects on how different this is from the turn-based game he knew. There are no command prompts here. Realizing he has only one option, he calls out a name, Val. In response to his call, A small, gelatinous slime creature materializes from his outstretched hand. Luke gives it a simple command. Take full control for 1 minute, and make sure neither combatant is seriously injured. He internally plans to surrender as soon as he regains consciousness. The creature, Val, seems to give a cheerful affirmation. The creature immediately moves to intercept Dan's descending blade, blocking the sword with its gelatinous body. Dan's eyes widen in shock at the unexpected defense as Luke places his trust in his summon. With his defense in place, a confident, knowing smile spreads across Luke's face, while in the background, Dan continues to struggle against the surprisingly resilient creature. Suddenly, his confident expression falters. He looks down at his own hand with a pained grunt, a wave of confusion washing over him as he questions the strange sensation. He realizes his own body is moving against his will. His hand darts out, grabbing Dan by the face, who struggles and demands to be released. In a flash of autonomous movement, Luke's body expertly crosses Dan's swords to disarm him before sending him flying back with a powerful kick. A single, detached thought crosses Luke's mind. Whoops! He stands over his defeated opponent, his sword having clattered to the ground. With a clenched fist, he prepares for his next move, his expression grim. From the stands, his father, Duke Descustos, observes the outcome with satisfaction. He notes that Dan isn't badly hurt, just as he ordered. The Duke muses that no matter how Dan messed up, the game was rigged. Luke was always meant to end it with his secret attribute magic technique. In this situation, the Duke believes it's impossible for his son to lose. However, on the field, Luke has a different plan. He lunges forward, determined to end the match himself. His fist flies towards Dan, but at the last second his hand opens. He gently cups the back of Dan's head, whispering a command, sleep. It is already too late for Dan to react. He knows about Dan's unique ability, attribute magic boost, a powerful skill that supercharges and strengthens magic. While it massively empowers both magical and physical strength, Dan's current inexperience limits its effectiveness. And because of this inexperience, Dan's magic tolerance is low, leaving him unable to resist the sleep spell. Luke reflects that while he isn't supposed to lose, it would be problematic for him, the designated villain, to actually win this duel. As Dan's consciousness fades, he realizes he must deceive the onlookers. Luke continues to hold him upright, the spell taking full effect. But before he can collapse naturally, the slime creature, Val, suddenly appears and engulfs him. From the stands, Lynch and Marshall cries out in alarm, questioning what is happening, while Glorin Research looks on in stunned silence. The chaotic scene prompts the duel announcer to intervene. She declares Luke Hugolo Disgustos the winner and pleads for him to release Dan. Her declaration does nothing to stop the assault. Lynch screams Dan's name in horror as the slime brutally slams him into the stone floor, knocking him unconscious. As he lay unconscious on the ground, Lynch knelt beside him, her face contorted in fury. She screamed at Luke, calling him scum and accusing him of attacking Dan after he had already lost consciousness. Unmoved, Luke looked down on them, questioning her lack of noble pride and calling her behavior lame for disparaging the victor. He continued, his expression cold and unwavering, stating that he never wanted to fight in the first place. Since he was forced into it, he declared his opponent should have been prepared for what would happen. Turning from Lynch and Dan, he addressed the entire assembly of students. He announced to everyone that, effective immediately, he would accept any challenge to a ranking match, rhetorically asking if it wasn't a good deal for them. His audacious declaration left Lynch momentarily speechless. Luke, meanwhile, touched his forehead, noting aloud that he might be exhausted at the moment, further goading the onlookers. Lynch could only grit her teeth in frustration. He scanned the silent crowd in the stands, asking if nobody was willing to step forward. Seeing no response, he declared that he would take the opportunity to teach them all something important. In the audience, Libera Glico watched the scene unfold. She quietly stated her respect for the intelligent and for those who dedicate themselves to the pursuit of magic. Luke's voice cut through the quiet, declaring his lesson. He detests fools who possess nothing but brute force. He gestured dismissively toward Dan's unconscious form, labeling him a barbarian. His eyes narrowed with a chilling intensity. He vowed that if anyone else like Dan, a barbarian, dared to challenge him, he would ensure they could never see the light of another day, making it impossible for them to ever challenge him again. His threat hung in the air, met by the stunned silence of the other students. Standing over the defeated Dan, Lynch Marshall clenches her fists, declaring that such inhuman acts cannot go unpunished. From a distance, Luke Descustos watches the scene unfold, hoping his villainous performance will dissuade any further challenges, though he knows his classmates will surely gossip. She turns and points furiously at Luke, shouting that he will regret his actions and that Dan will eventually defeat him. As she storms off, Luke calmly asks Libera if she is certain she won't tell them something, prompting Libera to ask what he means. He yawns, casually admitting his laziness. A memory surfaces of the duel's conclusion. Just before Dan would have struck the ground, Luke had secretly summoned a large slime to cushion his fall completely. He explains to Libera that he feels he's tried to talk to Dan more than enough for one day. He dismisses Dan as an idiot who picks fights based on a conceited sense of justice, making any attempt to explain the situation pointless. Luke concludes that he would much rather relax and focus on his magic studies. Libera concedes that his reasoning is sound, but then she adjusts her glasses and asks if he is truly sure about this course of action. Luke lets out a weary sigh. Before he can answer, Princess Irina Alesidas approaches them. She addresses him formally as Your Highness, but quickly insists he call her Irina, as their classmates. In response, Luke tells her to simply call him Luke and asks what she wants. She thanks him for what she calls a compliment, remarking that the only other person who would look at her that way is her brother, Testa. She mentions that Luke's own brothers are in the same year as Testa and are considered the top 2 students. Irina then expresses her frustration, stating that she finds Luke hard to deal with because he doesn't seem to understand that her royal status means he can't treat her like everyone else. Her expression softens considerably. She thanks him for showing her such a wonderful match and admits that she now understands him as well. She encourages him to live up to the Disgusto's name, but her thought trails off, unfinished. She then excuses herself and walks away, leaving Luke and Libera behind. Libera watches her go, musing aloud that perhaps the princess doesn't hate him after all. Luke simply wonders why she even came to speak with him in the first place. Libera cheerfully congratulates him on getting through the orientation day. When she asks what's on his mind, Luke looks toward the sky and dismisses her concern, telling her it's nothing to worry about. He stood on the balcony, gazing out at the sprawling, illuminated estate under the night sky. From behind, Karen's voice cut through the quiet, asking what he was doing out there. He replied that he was just catching his breath. Inside, a table laden with clean plates served as evidence of a fine meal. Karen sat smiling, a glass in her hand, and confessed that she had eaten so much because it had been a while since she last had his cooking. She added that she was glad he liked it, as she had done her very best for his sake. He admitted that nothing cheered him up quite like her food. As she beamed, he turned away slightly, asking her not to praise him too much, explaining that he would end up getting carried away. She gently dismissed his modesty, pointing out that his accomplishments were his own and that she had only given a few pieces of advice. He smiled back at her, encouraging her to get carried away all she wanted, remarking that she was very accomplished with all her successful projects. Her expression grew earnest as she insisted that being too humble was an issue. She truly wanted to praise him. He, however, deflected the credit, stating that the achievements belonged to her, the one who made a business from his ideas, and to the Caribbean family for their support. Karen laughed, remarking that he was the only noble who would say something like that. He simply told her not to worry about him, reasoning that since he had the Caribbean family support, he was getting rich from the wealth that trickled down to him anyway. The memory of their long history, filled with countless conversations over the years, hung in the air. Karen gently placed her hand over his, her gaze intent as she asked if he was serious. He confirmed without hesitation that he was. She looked at him, her voice soft. Hey Luke, do you still only love me for my cooking? She knew, of course, that he was aware of everything, her lazy lifestyle, her family's indifference, and that even though he first fell in love with her cooking, he had kept loving all of her just the same. In response, he dropped to one knee before her, stunning her into silence. He declared that he couldn't live without her anymore and that he would love her more than anything, even if one of their families fell into ruin. Flustered, she reminded him that they weren't married yet. He smiled warmly and held out his hand. So please, he implored, let me stay by your side tonight. A fond smile touched her lips as she looked at him, softly calling him a villain. As he held Karen close during their flight, she warned him that if he brought anyone other than Syrup on these mid-air walks, she would become jealous. He promised to keep that in mind. The next morning, a new day began. During an early run, the night apprentice Dan was surprised to see someone else already out and about. He was even more shocked to recognize the figure as one of the Disgustos, wondering what on earth he could be doing at this hour. His surprise turned to suspicion as he saw a strange aura emanating from Luke. He wondered if the Disgustos was planning some sort of villainous scheme. To find out, he decided to use his trace ability to observe from afar. What he witnessed was not a plot, but something beautiful. Luke moved with flawless, fluid motions, a display that looked like a graceful dance. Dan quickly realized, however, that these were the movements of a master martial artist. The sight forced Dan to reconsider his prior defeat. He knew that physical abilities typically improve with one's level, making it almost impossible to lose to a much lower-leveled opponent. He had first assumed he'd simply let his guard down, but now he understood the truth. Luke was just extremely strong in every other way, enough to overcome a massive level difference. He clenched his fist, recalling how Luke had acted like a carefree, spoiled noble. He now realized that beneath that facade, Luke was a really hard worker. It was a truth unlike anything he had ever encountered, but he knew it was real. This new understanding made him reflect on his own path. He had trained every single day in the martial territory, believing that fighting was everything and that his effort was enough to become a great knight. Now, he was sure that no matter how hard he trained, it wouldn't be enough to catch up to Luke. A strange feeling began to stir inside him. Pausing his run, he looked out over the city at dawn and decided he would have to think about this revelation a bit more. As he started running again, his thoughts crystallized. He realized his biggest problem. The martial way of training had made him strong, but he lacked the knowledge to put that strength to good use. He admitted to himself that he was bad at studying and didn't understand his own attribute magic, but resolved to push through, thankful for the Academy's excellent learning environment. His frustration finally erupted in a shout. This was no joke. He desperately wanted to beat Luke. But as an image of his rival's intensely focused expression filled his mind, he was struck by a crushing thought. He couldn't even imagine how he would ever accomplish that. He grits his teeth, a determined glint in his eye despite the bandages on his face. He has only lost to Luke once, and he vows that he will surpass him someday, for sure. But as he watches Luke run along the distant castle walls at dawn, he realizes the gap between them is immense. Luke seems so far ahead that he can't even see him properly, glowing with an almost holy aura of power. Later that morning, inside the academy cafeteria, Luke and Libera approach the breakfast line. At a nearby table, Iris sips her honey tea and offers them a polite greeting. She advises Luke to make sure he eats a proper breakfast, to which he agrees. He finds it a mystery how she can look out for others when she herself is suffering from low blood pressure and is clearly in a bad mood. He reflects that attending the academy seems to have turned his sister into someone capable of caring for others. As a high-ranking noble, she must always act with a strict and kind demeanor, a role that has only made her beauty and divine voice grow stronger. He recalls how Iris was the main organizer of the newcomer party held by the noble faction. He had attended as the freshman representative to say hello, but quickly became the center of attention as the one who had turned the tables on the royal faction. Bringing his thoughts back to the present, Luke bids his sister farewell. As he and Libera leave, Libera quietly considers suggesting a supplement for Iris's low blood pressure. Iris simply tells Luke to give it his best. As he walks through the academy halls, he realizes the rumors of his sensational first fight have spread. Other students part ways as he approaches, creating a wide berth around him. He mentally sorts the reactions. The noble faction regards him with respect and admiration, while the royal faction shows open disgust and contempt. The center faction and the commoners, however, seem merely interested, unsure what to think. Taking his seat in the classroom, he sighs in relief. It seems his threats worked, and the other students should stay out his way for now. Finally, he can focus on studying in peace. He considered the academy's curriculum, which was divided into two types of courses. Compulsory subjects covered general education, while electives focused on practical skills like magic. Realizing it was structured much like a modern university, he knew his first step was to decide which courses to take. He recalled that in the game, the lesson served only to raise a character's stats. With a confident smile, he dismissed the thought, deciding that since it didn't matter to him, he would simply pick whatever he liked. With this freedom, he resolved not to take a single practical subject, believing the compulsory courses would be more than enough. He needed more knowledge of magic, but only in his pursuit of ultimate laziness. His path was clear. He would focus solely on magic. Just then, Libera Glicko approached, announcing that lessons were over for the day. She asked if he had decided on his courses. He confirmed that he had, choosing magic and magic tools as his main focus, intending to supplement them with the compulsory subjects. Libera replied that she had also made her choice and, turning with a brisk motion, declared, "So let's go." Her sudden declaration prompted him to ask where they were headed. With a bright smile, she announced their destination, a private training room, a place where they could study or practice skills as needed. She elaborated, showing him a map of the academy grounds. The facilities available to a student depended on their class rank. However, as the class hero, he had the first choice of any facility. Luke realized this granted him yet another significant advantage. They soon arrived at their destination. Libera gestured to a set of large doors, announcing, "This is it." As they walked, Luke mused that the academy must publicly assign ranks to the students specifically to stow competition among them. The doors opened to reveal a vast, empty hall. Luke was taken aback by its immense size. Libera agreed that it was too large, remarking that it needed one final, small touch. She then knelt down, placing her hand near the floor. She then slammed her palm against the floorboards with force. A brilliant magic circle erupted from the point of impact, spreading across the entire room. In an instant, the empty hall transformed into a complex, high-tech training ground, with platforms and structures materializing from alight. She proudly announced that the space had been returned to its normal size, leaving Luke momentarily speechless with awe. He recovered, agreeing that they could now study peacefully. He explained that since he was the only magic user in his household, the common magic she wielded, the kind not detailed in books, was actually the rarest type to him. He eagerly asked her to teach him, and she readily consented. She began her lesson by identifying the glowing pattern on the floor as a magic circle, noting it was smaller than those found on common tools. She stressed the importance of precision. The circle must be drawn perfectly to cast a spell without variance, a skill that demands practice. He put her words into practice, manipulating a small, formless construct of mana. He reflected on the nature of magic. While convenient, it required significant effort. Attributeless magic, he considered, relied purely on mana and became weak without a strong imagination, whereas attribute magic was easier to use but demanded a deep understanding for true mastery. His contemplation was met with Libera's bright enthusiasm. She declared that this complexity was precisely what made magic so interesting. He could only agree, acknowledging its profound depth. With their initial practice complete, they moved to a table to get down to business. Libera proposed they start by writing down their respective information, and Luke readily agreed. They reviewed her information first. Her attribute was water, which Luke noted seemed quite versatile. Libera confirmed this, expressing her excitement to experiment with its wide range of applications in offense, defense, and support. He then presented his own information, sliding the paper across the table. He confidently told her to expect great things from him, certain she would find many uses for his abilities. Her excitement turned to shock as she read the details. She questioned if he should be showing her something so sensitive, insisting that a magic of this nature should be kept secret. He responded nonchalantly, suggesting he would simply describe it to others as a form of magic that manipulates human bodies. Her concern lingered, but he reassured her, explaining that it was fine since Malsaglico was already aware of it. With a confident smile, he then formally asked her to keep his secret. In response to his trust, Libera gives her word, promising to keep his secret. She offers her thanks for his confidence in her. She accepts his condition, her mind already racing to process the new information. She deduces that the sleep ability he mentioned must be what he used to make Dan faint so suddenly. It's a type of magic she's never encountered before, one he calls Slav. He confirms her unspoken excitement, admitting he feels the same way. Libera, her hands clasped in anticipation, expresses how much she's looking forward to seeing how he will utilize these unique powers. His attention then shifts to a device on the table, pointing out a section under attributeless magic that simply reads Unknown. Libera recognizes the subject of the reading as Val, and theorizes that the magic watch is incapable of analyzing or recording original magic because it isn't registered in any database. She continues her line of thought, realizing that if the watch were equipped with an appraisal function powerful enough to analyze attribute magic, it would completely change how adventurers gather information and explore dungeons. Luke offers a possible explanation, suggesting the device likely references the Ministry of Magic Central database. While the future potential of the magic watch seems immense, Libera quickly tempers her excitement with a dose of reality. She explains the significant technical hurdles involved, noting the difficulty of fitting such a complex function into a small package. The hardware's mana capacity is too low, and creating a device with a decent range would require rare, lightweight metals. In the classroom, the teacher Glorn Research announces the next extracurricular activity, dungeon practice, an event that all first-year students must go through. As he speaks, Luke Disgustos sits at his desk, internally lamenting what a pain this will be. Glorn begins to present the teams. He announces Team 1, with Irina Alessidas as its leader. The other members shown are Dan and Libera Glico. It is noted that it's quite rare for Linshin and the protagonist to be on separate teams. He then moves on to Team 2, declaring that Linshin Marshall will be its leader. Her teammates, including Luke and Muriel, are shown as Linshin enthusiastically accepts the role. Glorn prepares to announce the next team. Before he can continue, Libera Glico raises her hand, addressing the teacher. As Luke's attendant, she requests to be placed on the same team as him. Glorn immediately rejects the request, explaining that they must consider the grade balance between the teams and asks her to bear with it. He tells Libera to do her best on her own team, and she lowers her head in disappointment. She reluctantly agrees. Seeing her disappointment, Luke turns to her with a gentle smile and tells her not to get injured. Despite his reassurance, Libera adjusts her glasses, her expression still fraught with worry. She believes Luke will be all right, but she still urges him to be careful. With the teams finalized, Glorn instructs everyone to go to their respective groups and begin their meetings. The students begin to move, heading to different rooms to convene. In another room, Linshin Marshall stands confidently, hands on her hips, and introduces herself as the team leader. Beside her, Muriel quietly introduces herself as a scholarship student who enjoys studying but is not skilled in fighting. She seems intimidated, wondering to herself if Linshin is scary. The cat-like beastman, Ruby, cheerfully introduces herself next. She explains that she's an active adventurer, so the team can rely on her when it comes to dungeons. Luke then introduces himself as Luke Hugolo Disgustos. Muriel then speaks up, offering to buy anything the team might need, whether it's bread or juice. As she makes the offer, Luke internally questions if she is positioning herself as an errand girl. He finds himself flustered by Ruby's proximity, internally struggling with the urge to pet her cat-like ears. Sensing his hesitation, she expresses her happiness and asks to call him Luke Sama, inviting him to pat her head if he wishes. He quietly agrees. From a distance, Libera's face contorts in shock at the display. Ruby, meanwhile, winks playfully and declares to her new teammates that they can do as they please. Her casual declaration immediately draws a sharp rebuke from Linshin, who furiously demands to know what Ruby is doing. She reminds her that they are meant to be discussing the team's dynamics and orders her to listen. Her anger then shifts, her glare falling squarely on Luke, whom she clearly blames for the disruption. He can only think to himself how troublesome the situation has become. Sensing the need to de-escalate, Muriel calmly suggests they take a break. The team sits, and Luke seems to relax slightly at the suggestion. Her attempt at peacemaking, however, takes an unexpected turn. Muriel offers her lap as a pillow, an offer Ruby enthusiastically seconds. This new development only serves to horrify Linshin further. She recoils, questioning what the others are talking about and decrying their impurity. Luke, caught in the middle, thinks to himself that a lap pillow is too forward, given they have only just met. She continues her tirade, reminding them that they are in a strategy meeting and certainly not permitted to sleep. As she fumes, Luke internally notes how fussy she is. Unfazed, Muriel announces that it is time for their final checks. With the discussion finally back on track, Linshin states her role as a knight on the front lines. Ruby chimes in, confirming she will be there as well, detailing her skills with a dagger, her agility for dodging, and her use of attribute magic. Following their lead, Muriel defines her position as the rearguard. She expresses confidence in her healing magic and notes her proficiency with archery, completing the initial strategic overview for the team. She reacts with utter shock as Luke, looking completely drained, states plainly that he wants to sleep. In response to his fatigue, Linshin calmly offers to carry him, as they are both part of the rearguard. Muriel looks on, surprised. Linshin's demeanor then shifts to fury as she turns on Ruby, shouting that the reason he's getting carried away is because Ruby keeps coddling him. Unfazed, Ruby playfully meows, much to Linshin's frustration. The argument ceases as Linshin, clearly exasperated, asks if everyone is alright with challenging the dungeon this weekend. Ruby cheerfully agrees, Luke concurs, and Muriel states she has no objections. With that settled, Linshin declares their meeting over for the day. As the meeting concludes, he watches Muriel and Ruby walk off together. He finds their immediate favoritism strange, questioning if they're trying to appeal to him because of his noble status. He concludes that it will be difficult to truly get along with them until they resolve their own personal problems first. A different thought then strikes him. He considers the possibility that they don't see him as a noble to gain favor with, but rather as an idol, picturing them as adoring fans. He ultimately decides that this is a far better alternative than being hated. Meanwhile, from across the hall, Libera Glicko calls out Luke's name. Standing next to her, Dan notes that Team 1 appears to be done with their meeting and asks Libera if she was able to get along with her own teammates. She approaches Luke, taking his hand and asking about the conversation he just had. He gives her a reassuring smile, telling her there's no issue and that it's time for them to leave. As he watches them depart, Dan is left with a lingering question, wondering to himself if Luke still harbors hatred for him and the others. His gaze remains fixed on Luke's retreating figure, his face a mask of solemn contemplation. He reflects on his long-held belief that the protagonist would always hate him, but now, a new realization dawns. The hostility he expected is gone. Luke Descustos stood alone, a peculiar sensation washing over him. This feeling accompanied him into the weekend, as he led his team along a path toward their destination, the Rank 2 Forest Dungeon. As they walked, Libera provided an overview of the dungeon. It was located in the mountains behind the school, and despite its size, its rank was a mere 2 out of a possible 10. She explained this was because students often hunted the monsters within, keeping their numbers down. Ruby added to the explanation, clarifying that a dungeon's core is a great mass of mana. People venture into them seeking resources, such as magic stones that can power magical tools. To keep the dungeons at a suitable rank, adventurers are dispatched to cull the monster population. Later, as Luke rested, Linshin and Muriel hovered over him with concern, asking if he was tired. Muriel offered him a drink, but he assured them he was fine. Libera quietly observed, asking if there was anything else he needed. His calm demeanor seemed to spark a realization in Muriel. She finally understood why she held such a favorable impression of him. As this thought crossed her mind, Luke directed her to fire an arrow at a specific target, and she readily complied. The memory of a conversation from a few days prior surfaced. Karen had been serving him tea, explaining that she had heard the story from Muriel herself, how Luke had cured her little brother of an illness. Karen relayed that Muriel was deeply grateful to him. He remembered the boy from the orphanage. A vision of Muriel, her face flushed with sincere gratitude, came to his mind. He had asked Karen why Muriel would confide in her. Karen explained that because they were now on the same team, Muriel felt a strong desire to repay his kindness. She had even gone so far as to seek permission from Luke's own fiancé. This memory cast Muriel's current actions in a new light. She felt she had now defeated her debt, and thanks to Karen's intervention, she could relax. Karen, for her part, had simply observed Muriel's deep sense of gratitude, never intending to create an obligation. Ruby returns from her task, triumphantly holding a magic stone aloft. She reports to a resting Luke that since the monsters don't move, her job is quite easy. This effortless progress, however, infuriates Linshin. She shouts that they aren't fighting at all, revealing that Luke has simply used his magic to put all the surrounding monsters to sleep. Her dissatisfaction is total. She complains about everything, even lamenting that she barely has to move. The strategy is simple. Muriel will eliminate the sleeping monsters with her bow, and Ruby will collect the magic stones and finish off any stragglers. Even as she easily dispatches a slumbering creature, she yells that this is not combat practice, questioning why both she and the monsters are effectively asleep. Seeing her frustration, Muriel steps in. She calmly tells Linshin to leave it to her, promising to explain everything for Luke's sake. She begins by clarifying that the magic Luke uses to make the monsters sleep also helps him focus his own magical power more intensely. He is asleep because he can still use his abilities in that state. She continues, explaining that thanks to Luke's support, even someone like her, who isn't skilled in direct combat, can safely enter a dangerous dungeon, practice archery, and increase her level. With a warm, gentle smile, she concludes by asking Linshin if she now understands what kind of person Luke is and what he's been doing for them all this time. Her heartfelt words are met with a simple gesture from a newly awakened Luke, who pats her on the head and tells her she did well. Overcome with emotion, Muriel begins to cry with joy, leaving Luke completely bewildered. The tender moment is interrupted by Ruby, who rushes in declaring it's unfair and demanding a head pat for herself as well. Linshin's frustration boils over. She argues that a dungeon is meant to be a dangerous place where a team strengthens its bonds through hardship. To her, their current, safe method feels like simple labor, and she finds the entire situation strange. Her outburst is met with Luke's calm inquiry. He asks what could possibly be wrong with clearing a dungeon safely and easily. Linshin falters, admitting that it isn't necessarily bad, but her unease remains. He continues, explaining that their efficiency benefits everyone, those who want the monsters hunted, and those who need the resources found within the dungeon. Muriel and Ruby listen quietly as he speaks. His gaze hardens as he poses a direct question, his fist clenched at his side. He asks Linshin if she truly wishes to thrust her comrades into danger. The pointed question strikes a nerve. Flustered, Linshin shouts that she doesn't want that at all. Seeing her reaction, Luke calmly asks if she now understands which of them was saying something inappropriate. With the matter seemingly settled, he raises a hand and suggests they disband for the day, leaving Linshin speechless and visibly troubled. She glances at a nearby, sleeping monster, reflecting on the situation. She thinks to herself that if their leader isn't motivated, then they should stop, as it's only a practice session. Turning away with her head bowed, Linshin offers an apology. Before she can leave, Luke, resting comfortably, tells her to wait. He opens his eyes and reverses his earlier decision, stating that they should continue since they still have time. Linshin looks toward him, surprised by his change of heart. With the tension resolved, the team resumes their training in perfect sync. Muriel draws her bow, Ruby prepares her magic, and Linshin charges forward, sword raised to strike another sleeping beast. Luke Disgustos rests comfortably on a large, plush cushion, surrounded by small, fish-like creatures. His moment of peace is interrupted as he stands with his team. A stout, bearded man announces that he will be sending the magic stones to the school, declaring that they can finally go home. As the man speaks, Luke turns his gaze toward Linshin. She lets out a heavy sigh, her expression hardening. Turning to face him directly, she requests a ranking match. She pointedly asks if he has already forgotten what happened with Dan. He calmly deflects the challenge, instructing Ruby to be her opponent instead. Linshin immediately objects, arguing that there would be no point. She insists that if she wins, it is he who must tell her to fight without using her magic. His eyes narrow with intensity. He declares that he absolutely hates uncivilized people, then questions her motives directly. Does she truly wish to fight and risk the lives of their team? She appears stunned by his sharp words. Ruby steps in, confidently telling Linshin to leave it to her. Luke clarifies his position, stating that it makes no difference if she fights him or Ruby, because he is not going to fight. Muriel chimes in, agreeing that Luke's reasoning is correct. He turns to Ruby to confirm, asking if she is okay with the arrangement. She readily agrees with a cheerful Naya. Defeated, Linshin lowers her head and quietly concedes, saying, "All right." Ruby approaches Linshin, explaining that while there is no real reason for her to fight, she sees this as a significant compromise. Ruby acknowledges that Linshin is an awkward person who can only express herself through combat. She strikes a pose, formally challenging Linshin to a ranking match as Luke's stand-in. With renewed resolve, Linshin accepts the challenge. Nearby, Luke observes, silently hoping that this duel will be enough to satisfy her. In the training grounds, Ruby approaches Muriel with a direct question. She notes that Muriel is an adventurer and must therefore be particular about fights, so she asks why Muriel approves of Luke. Muriel, in turn, asks what she means by that. She explains that an adventurer's true aim isn't to fight. Muriel reacts with disbelief, calling Ruby an idiot for the statement. Ruby elaborates on her philosophy, stating that adventurers aim to survive while putting their lives on the line against monsters, and that it's even better if no one gets hurt. Luke and Linshin watch from the sidelines as she speaks. Because of this, she continues, nothing makes her happier than a controlled fight like this one. She tells Muriel to save her arguments for later and challenges her to a ranking match, which Muriel accepts with a determined glare. Linshin formally announces the start of their duel. As the match begins, Ruby explodes forward with astonishing speed, closing the distance in an instant. She slides low to the ground, taunting Muriel not to underestimate her. Her kick connects solidly with Muriel's shield, which she barely managed to raise in time. The force of the blow reverberates through the metal. Although Muriel was accustomed to sparring from her lessons, she finds that she simply cannot keep up with the sheer velocity of Ruby's attacks. The relentless speed is overwhelming. Muriel realizes with a start that she can't raise her shield in time to defend. Ruby darts past her guard, declaring her far too slow. With a triumphant expression, Ruby calls upon the elements, commanding the wind to blow. A powerful gust of wind slams into Muriel, knocking her completely off her feet. She falls to her knees, defeated, as Ruby stands over her, the clear victor of the match. Her defeat is made official as an unseen announcer declares Ruby the winner. As Luke watches, Ruby looks back over her shoulder, stating that the match is over. She walks away, cheerfully announcing her victory. Luke offers his congratulations, telling her it was a good job and confirming that her ranking will be adjusted accordingly. He reaches out and gently pats the cat-eared girl on the head. Ruby closes her eyes and lets out a contented purr, enjoying the praise. As they interact, Linshin kneels beside the still-down Muriel. Ignoring the others, she looks at Muriel and asks what she wants. He explains that he was just thinking of taking her to the infirmary. Linshin considers his words for a moment before quietly telling him to please do so. With the decision made, Linshin lifts Muriel into her arms. Ruby gives a simple acknowledgement, and Luke suggests they all part ways for the day as Linshin begins to carry Muriel away. The scene shifts to a private conversation between Dan and Linshin. Dan reveals a startling truth. Before he was reincarnated, Linshin was his favorite character from story. He explains that while one story path led to her becoming an ideal wife, his favorite was a different route where she loses to Luke and is forced to marry him. In that version of events, the protagonist, Dan's former self, eventually attacks and defeats Luke. He continues his explanation, gesturing to a screen displaying the story. He states that after Luke is dead, he can get Linshin back. On the screen, his former self pleads with the princess to come back to him so they can live together again. The scene he describes materializes. His former self stands over the body of slain Luke. In the background, a horrified Linshin watches, stating that Luke is now her only family. She then kneels, cradling Luke's body. Her expression hardens as she glares up at Dan's former self, her voice cold as she accuses him directly. Dan, you've killed my husband. He concluded his tale. The image of a defiant Linshin from that other life burned into his memory. She had remained silent, cradling the dying Luke, her gaze filled with cold fury. In that moment, she had clutched Luke's body and declared that she would never belong to him, even if it meant her own death. The declaration had stunned his past self, who could only cry out her title in disbelief. The memory shifted to another violent encounter. A clawed hand lashed out, prompting Dan to curse in frustration. As the dust from the blows settled, he stood his ground. A strange thought surfaced from his past life's knowledge. She had recognized that whoever took her chastity from her would face punishment. Returning to the present, Dan spoke to Luke in the hallway, explaining that the alternate Linshin had been fully devoted to him, right up to the bitter end. The revelation left Luke sweating and wide-eyed. That image of pure and deep devotion, a version of herself comforting a weeping Luke, was now burned into the back of the current Linshin's mind. Observing from afar, Irina contemplated yet another route. She mused that a girl with such a pure soul would become the perfect, useless husband machine, devoting herself to him no matter what. She wondered if she herself was the one rendering him useless. Breaking from her thoughts, she called out to Luke, formally addressing him by his family name, Disgustos. Dan stood nearby, watching the exchange. Luke then explained the situation to a surprised Dan. He confirmed that the princess had indeed lost, but her challenge had not been to him. She had challenged Ruby. When Luke refused to participate, Irina fought Ruby in his stead. Dan processed this information, reflecting internally. He had been on guard, expecting Luke to lash out at him again, but the boy was completely calm. It dawned on him that this was the first time the two of them had ever had a proper conversation. He looks down, addressing Luke with an uncharacteristic apology. He feels he has caused a lot of trouble for Disgustos, an admission that Luke finds unexpected. Turning his back slightly, Dan offers a simple, sorry about that, leaving Luke to stare after him with a contemplative expression. Luke dismisses the apology, claiming there's no reason for it. This sudden change of heart puzzles Dan, who internally questions what Luke is up to, noting that the protagonist he remembers from his past life was far more impulsive and hot-headed. His thoughts continue as he clenches a fist. He reaffirms that Duke Disgustos remains an enemy of the princess, and that he will eventually have to take him down. However, he concedes that this version of Luke is different. In a surprising shift, Dan turns back and points enthusiastically at Luke, praising him as an amazing hard worker who is far ahead of the rest of them. He scratches his head, admitting that Luke isn't the detestable noble he had first imagined. He grins and tells Luke to shut up, prompting a smirk from the other boy. Luke retorts that it seems even an idiot is capable of learning. Luke's expression softens as he concedes that while Dan is his enemy, he isn't a bad guy. As he speaks, Dan approaches, now carrying an unconscious Linshin, and thanks him, stating he will take her from here. Holding Linshin, Dan processes Luke's words. He realizes he must draw a line, finding Luke's sudden lack of defense strange. Still, he accepts that Luke doesn't see him as a bad person and decides he will ask the stubborn princess to refrain from charging at him, though he worries his words may not be enough given her position. Abruptly, the atmosphere shatters. An intense, dark pressure emanates from Luke, who glares down with cold fury. He snarls that Dan is a plebeian who knows nothing about him, causing Dan to look up in startled confusion. As a dark substance drips from his hand, Luke internally acknowledges that Dan has guts. He is impressed that his rival can endure the great pressure he is currently exuding, even as Dan visibly strains under the immense force. He continues to tremble under the immense pressure, sweat beading on his brow. Luke watches him, a calm expression on his face, and offers a strange piece of advice: to stay just as he is and grow into a splendid protagonist. As the pressure suddenly vanishes, Luke turns his back on the bewildered Dan. He adds a clarification, stating that Dan shouldn't get the wrong idea. This is simply what is best for him. Luke, after all. He walks away, reaffirming his own identity in his mind. He resolves, the laziest and most villainous noble of all. A faint, self-satisfied laugh escapes his lips, leaving Dan trembling and utterly baffled by the sudden shift from life-threatening intimidation to this bizarre declaration. Later, as the students gather for a new lesson, Luke reflects on the earlier event with a single thought: incredible. Their teacher, Silas, announces the start of their extracurricular activities. Each team is to spend the next 3 days inside a dungeon. She elaborates on the rules. The students must use the basic skills they have learned to secure everything from food to shelter. While the faculty will be on standby within the dungeon, calling for non-emergency aid will count against them, so they should refrain from doing so. As the students prepare, Muriel approaches Luke, perplexed by his lack of gear. She questions why he is completely unarmed and empty-handed, muttering to herself about a promise someone made not to interfere with her fighting style. She contrasts his lack of preparation with her own, showing off her full equipment. Anticipating a critique about having too much baggage, she declares that women need to be prepared, as they require a lot of supplies for 3 whole days. Irina teasingly asks if Muriel doesn't still have too much. Meanwhile, Ruby observes the group, mentally categorizing them. Irina, the young noble lady. Herself, an adventurer used to camping. And Muriel, someone who grew up in an orphanage. Irina then instructs Muriel to brief Ruby on everything she needs to know about the dungeon, which Muriel agrees to. As Muriel starts to walk off, Ruby calls for her to wait, while Irina playfully tells Ruby to sort through her own gear. As the group prepares to enter the dungeon, Dan collapses under the weight of his own over-preparedness, lamenting his fate. Lynchen attempts to bring order, instructing him on how to pack efficiently, but Ruby takes a more direct approach, pulling unnecessary items from his gear while he protests. Lynchen has to restrain Ruby, who sheepishly admits that she also brought too much useless equipment. Nearby, Libera eyes Luke's complete lack of gear and wonders aloud if he, in contrast, brought too little. Luke, however, is unconcerned. He privately considers his all-in pouch, a magical item that conveniently contains clothes, food, and shelter. He notes Lynchen's worried expression, wondering if she's concerned for him, but misjudges her thoughts. He tells her directly that he won't be sharing any of his food, then reassures her not to worry about him. With a calm expression, he suggests that everyone should simply focus on getting along for the next 3 days. With that, the group ventures into the woods. As evening approaches, they agree to find a place to set up camp. Luke has already deployed his own comfortable resting spot and lounges upon it. As they settle in, Ruby mentions that she left her oversized bag with Dan. She then adds that Dan told her it was Luke who had started carrying her to the infirmary after their earlier duel. Moments later, Muriel approaches Luke while he reads, asking if he trains constantly. She relays gossip from the others. Ruby believes Luke is stronger than her, and Muriel herself told Ruby that Luke is likely just paying her back for a past favor. Luke snaps his book shut, declaring the conversation over. He states that since they are now entering the dungeon, there's no need for more talk, adding bluntly that he hates moving around. He lies back on his large, pillowy shelter, completely at ease. He tells the others he'll be counting on them as usual, noting that they were the ones who sacrificed their days off to prepare for this. Ready for the challenge, Ruby, Muriel, and Libera stand prepared. Acknowledging his delegation, they confirm they are ready and announce that it is time to begin. The entirety of Class 0 stands assembled, poised at the threshold of their greatest challenge yet, the dungeon conquest. Assistant teacher Silas glances back at her students, her elven features set with grim determination. Knight apprentice Dan is clad in armor, ready for battle, while adventurer Ruby stands near the front, a confident smirk on her face. Behind them, the rest of the class, Lynchen, Irina, Libera, and Muriel, prepare themselves. Even Luke is present in the background, standing beside the large, soft construct from his magical pouch. The scene then plunges into an abstract darkness, a fractured, crystalline void with a single, distant point of light at its core, symbolizing the unknown depths they are about